Inside a dim cavern, the steady clang of metal against stone echoed through the darkness. A white-haired young man suddenly froze mid-swing when he noticed faint blue droplets seeping through a crack in the ceiling. His breath caught as excitement lit up his eyes. At last, he had found what he was searching for. Carefully, he held up a glass bottle and let the glowing liquid drip inside, recognizing it immediately as ink. He glanced at the small black cat perched on his shoulder and offered a quiet thanks. Without Nero's help, this discovery would never have been possible. Turning toward the pale light at the cave's entrance, he thought about what this ink could mean. If he brought it back, maybe the pioneering corps would finally acknowledge him. With that hope in mind, he exited the cave and stepped onto a bleak gray wasteland. Far in the distance stood a dazzling city, radiant and alive. Within its shining walls, cheers erupted as elite warriors known as colorists made their entrance, their vividly colored hair marking them as heroes. Nearby citizens spoke with admiration, praising the team for slaying yet another giant monster. As long as these warriors existed, they believed, the city would remain protected. The atmosphere shifted abruptly to the Shadow District, where dim streets replaced bright towers. A line of applicants waited outside a building, a notice board declaring the entrance exam for the C-rank Pioneering Corps and stating that anyone with color could apply. Suddenly, the white-haired young man was hurled out of the building, crashing hard onto the ground. Two examiners stood above him. One shouted that someone like him had no place there. Gritting his teeth, the young man pushed himself up and held out the bottle of blue ink, demanding an explanation. He insisted that this ink proved his worth. The examiner sneered and pointed at him, spelling out the truth without mercy. He was rejected because he was colorless. In this world, he explained mockingly, one's role was fixed at birth, and the boy had no right to challenge it. The red-haired examiner released a pulse of crimson energy, cursing him as a worthless colorless. The force slammed into the young man, forcing a painful groan from his lips as he collapsed to one knee. From the top of the stairs, the examiner continued his lecture. With a look of absolute arrogance, he claimed that only people chosen like himself could ever become pioneers. Beyond the city lay the Black Lands, he said, a nightmare realm where the weak were devoured by darkness and savage creatures. Only true pioneers dared to explore those lands, gathering resources and fighting monsters so humanity could survive. They were heroes, and the boy before him could never be one. Returning to the present, the examiner's voice turned cold. For someone without color, achieving greatness was impossible. He ordered the boy to accept his place, to stick to lowly labor and never return. With a final threat promising death if he disobeyed, the door slammed shut. Left alone, the young man lowered his head. A soft rustling came from inside his coat as Nero peeked out, blinking curiously. The boy stroked the cat's head and spoke gently, saying they could try another place. He was used to rejection by now. Even so, he forced a small, stubborn smile and whispered a promise to Nero and himself that he would one day become the greatest colorist. Quickly, he tucked the cat back inside, wary of being seen. He wandered through the industrial streets, unsure where to go next, quietly hoping there was somewhere that would accept them. What he didn't realize was that a green-haired man was watching him from above. Later, in a crowded plaza, the young man flipped through a worn notebook. With a frustrated sigh, he crossed out yet another location. Every page was filled with rejection. Exhausted, he stared at the list, finally admitting defeat. With no better option left, he stopped in front of a modest building marked Mari Workshop. Muttering that he had no choice, he pushed the door open and called out. Inside, a white-haired girl wearing goggles looked up and greeted him with a bright smile, pushing her glasses up her nose. She immediately noticed his gloomy mood and guessed the outcome. As Nero jumped onto the table, she happily greeted the cat as well. Trying to lift his spirits, she insisted the examiners were blind to his talent. The young man shook his head, asking what talent mattered when no one would ever accept a colorless person. Mari countered that the fact he repeatedly survived the Black Lands and brought back resources was proof enough. He replied modestly, saying he only managed it because Nero helped him. Changing topics, he set the bottle of blue ink on the table and asked if she wanted to buy it. Mari's eyes sparkled as she agreed immediately, offering a generous price. She poured the ink into a connected pipe system, grumbling about how expensive ink had become due to shortages. The young man commented that this scarcity was exactly why people were calling for more pioneers. A glance at the machinery made it clear that the city's life depended on these vibrant fluids. Annoyed by the unfairness of it all, Mari asked if he had reconsidered her earlier suggestion. When he hesitated, She slammed a flyer onto the table and snapped that he couldn't afford to be picky. The paper advertised recruitment for the S-Rank Dawn Pioneering Corps, boldly stating that their entrance test was open to everyone and judged purely on skill. The young man stared at the notice, stunned. He admitted he had always avoided applying, convinced he would fail. Could a corps like that really acknowledge his ability? Mari urged him to try, insisting that if the test truly measured skill alone, this might be his chance. She smiled warmly, reminding him that becoming a colorist had always been his dream. A memory surfaced, him as a child, alone in the rain, clutching Nero tightly. That dream had never faded. Mari promised she would support him no matter what. Strengthened by her faith, the young man smiled at last. Gripping the flyer firmly, he decided he would hesitate no longer. He waved goodbye to Mari and stepped out of the workshop, resolve burning brighter than ever. Moving through the silent backstreets of the Shadow District, the protagonist held the recruitment flyer tightly, reminding himself that he needed to prepare carefully for the upcoming test. Without warning, he stopped. Nero suddenly stiffened inside his clothes, reacting to something behind them. A calm voice echoed from the darkness, casually asking what was wrong. At the same moment, a hand emerged from the shadows, gripping a wooden staff crowned with a glowing green crystal. The green-haired man who had been observing him stepped forward, raising the wand as a magical targeting sigil locked onto the protagonist. Back. The attack came instantly. A sharp blade of green energy shot forward. The protagonist spun around in alarm, but his reaction was too slow. The spell struck him squarely, tearing through his body and forcing a scream of pain from his throat as he collapsed onto the stone ground. The green-haired man approached with his companion, looking down at him without emotion. He mocked the boy, remarking that although he had narrowly avoided an instant death, it made no difference. He would die soon regardless. Blood pooled beneath the protagonist as he lay helpless, listening as the man coldly stated that the death of a colorless person would never matter to anyone. With fatting strength, the protagonist whispered for Nero. Seeing the cat's frightened face peeking from his clothes, he forced himself to move just enough to urge Nero to run away, using the last of his energy to protect him. The scene shifted to an industrial zone marked with warning signs for ink waste disposal. Groaning, the protagonist slowly regained consciousness, only to find the green-haired man looming over him with a twisted smile. He was lifted by the collar and dangled over a vast pit filled with thick, black sludge. The attacker laughed cruelly, saying it was unfortunate to be thrown in while still breathing. He explained that the pit contained discarded ink waste, a corrosive substance that dissolved anything it touched, leaving no trace behind. Panicking, the protagonist struggled weakly and demanded to know who this man was and why he had been targeted. The green-haired man revealed that earlier, while spying on him, they had been shocked, not by the boy himself, but by what he was hiding. A brief memory surfaced, showing the two observers focusing their attention on the creature concealed inside his jacket. The man explained that a being intelligent enough to bond with a human was extraordinarily rare. Calling the cat a priceless discovery, he tightened his grip on the protagonist's throat. Behind him, his assistant raised a small cage. Inside it, Nero cried out in distress. Horror washed over the protagonist as he realized his companion had already been captured. In desperation, the protagonist grabbed the man's collar and screamed for him to release the cat. The attacker barely reacted. Scoffing at the boy's fury, his eyes shining with greed, he declared that such a valuable creature was wasted on a colorless owner. Nero would fetch an enormous price on the black market. With ease, the man overpowered him, lifting him off the ground while choking him, sneering that the pet deserved a far better master. Dangling helplessly, the protagonist cursed himself for lowering his guard in the Shadow District. Memories of a lonely past filled his mind. He had endured rejection and discrimination his entire life, but losing Nero was something he refused to accept. Nero was his only family. A surge of rage erupted within him. He warned the man not to underestimate him and clamped down on the attacker's arm with all his remaining strength. The green-haired man suddenly froze. His expression twisted from arrogance to alarm as strange energy crackled across his face. A swirling green aura was forcibly drawn out of his body, flowing into the protagonist's hands. The man screamed in terror, overwhelmed by the sensation of something being ripped away from him. Panicked, he violently shook the boy loose and hurled him backward into the vat of toxic ink waste. Calling the encounter a waste of time, the attackers turned away. Nero cried desperately from within the cage as they declared their newfound wealth and left for the black market, ignoring the cat's cries entirely. Sinking beneath the dark liquid, the protagonist watched the light fade away. Nero's voice grew distant as he tried to move, but his body refused to respond. Memories flashed through his mind, and he wondered if this was where his story would end. Then he saw a vision of himself as a child, clutching the cat tightly. He realized he could not die, not yet. There was still a promise he had to fulfill. In an endless void, a mysterious voice echoed, demanding to know why he was doing nothing. Confused, the protagonist asked who was speaking. Massive words appeared before him, commanding him to accept it. Thoughts flooded his mind, urging him to save Nero and reclaim his true color. The voice demanded that he take back what belonged to him. From a swirling mass of black liquid, a hand reached out. The protagonist stood still as tendrils of darkness wrapped around him. He looked down at his hands, now engulfed in shadow, realizing he was no longer submerged in the ink. His memories felt fractured, but he pushed them aside. What mattered now was clear. His form became a silhouette of darkness, white eyes glowing faintly. He questioned what he had turned into. A soft cry broke through the silence. Looking up, he saw two blurred figures standing above, holding a small cage. Inside it, Nero cried out. The sound snapped him back to himself. Whatever he had become, one truth remained unchanged. He had to save Nero. He extended a shadow-covered hand toward the men. Suddenly, a colossal eruption of black energy surged upward from the depths. The green-haired man and his assistant recoiled in terror, screaming as they stumbled backward. Peering into the pit, they were horrified to find the ink waste completely gone. At the bottom stood a single dark figure, radiating an overwhelming, ominous presence as it slowly advanced toward them. The green-haired man trembled uncontrollably, his face drained of color. As a massive claw of shadow descended from above, he stammered in disbelief, wondering if the being before him was one of the dreaded creatures. The explosion left the Shadow District in complete ruin. Buildings were shattered, streets torn apart, and dark residue coated everything in sight. An elderly man screamed hysterically at a police officer, insisting he had seen a small hand appear out of nowhere, followed by an eruption of black energy that devastated the entire area in an instant. As the dust slowly settled, medics rushed in and carried away two unconscious bodies, the green-haired attacker and his assistant. A newly arrived pair observed the scene quietly. A red-haired man and a blue-haired woman looked down at the injured figures and noted that both were B-rank pioneers who had completely lost their color. The blue-haired woman frowned, unable to comprehend what kind of power could strip someone of their color entirely, while her companion urged her to stay focused on their task. The red-haired man explained that they had been dispatched after reports of a powerful creature manifesting inside the city. The nearby police officer stiffened in shock upon realizing he was speaking to high-ranking colorists. Nervously, he asked why elites of their level were operating in the Shadow District. The blue-haired woman answered calmly that they were conducting an investigation. When the red-haired man requested to see the impact site, the officer immediately led them forward. Standing at the edge of the massive crater, the red-haired man examined the debris, noticing dark stains embedded deep into the ground. His partner confirmed faint traces of a creature's presence. She pointed out how abnormal it was for such an entity to appear within city limits, especially so close to the outskirts, since only minor creatures ever slipped past the walls. Peering into the depths of the pit, the red-haired man speculated that this might be an entirely new variant. Though his expression appeared bored, his eyes were sharp. Tracking something that broke established patterns would not be easy. Far away, beyond the city, rubble lay scattered across a desolate landscape. In the darkness, a faint cry echoed. Lin groaned softly, his entire body aching as he lay hidden among the shadows. A rough, warm sensation brushed against his face. Slowly opening his eyes, he saw Nero licking his hair. Relief flooded through him. Without thinking, Lin pulled the black cat into a tight embrace, clutching him as if afraid he might disappear. Only then did the pain fully register, forcing a sharp wince from his lips. Sitting up with effort, Lin tried to piece together what had happened. He remembered the men who attacked him, remembered being thrown into the vat of black sludge, remembered sinking into the darkness. His breath caught as the realization hit. He was alive. Raising his hands, he stared at them in disbelief, struggling to understand how survival was even possible. When he touched his head, his fingers froze. His hair, once white, was now pitch black. Lin gripped it tightly, his mind reeling as confusion and disbelief overwhelmed him. Surrounded by absolute darkness, Lin slowly stood, realizing he couldn't see anything at all. Panic crept into his chest. He called out for Nero, his voice tense. In response, the cat leapt into the air and spun, releasing a brilliant white glow that illuminated their surroundings. The light revealed a horrifying sight. They were deep within a vast cavern, encircled by countless shadowy creatures lurking just beyond the light's edge. Lin stared in shock, his thoughts scrambling as he tried to understand where they were. Then it hit him. They were in the Black Lands. More specifically, the Black Forest, a place so dangerous that only B-rank pioneers were allowed to enter. As the monsters began to close in, Lin's heart raced. He shouted for Nero to stay close and bolted forward. The glowing cat flew beside him, lighting the way as they ran. A massive shadow serpent nearly crushed him, and Lin barely avoided it, shouting in alarm at how deadly the situation had become. Even so, he spared a breath to thank Nero for guiding him through the darkness. They climbed jagged cliffs, leapt across broken terrain, and finally dropped down a sheer vertical slope, putting distance between themselves and the pursuing horde. As Lin ran, something strange dawned on him. The fear in his expression slowly shifted into confusion. Dark energy pulsed faintly from his chest, and his body felt incredible. Despite the relentless sprint, he wasn't tired at all. He jumped across a massive gap with ease, landing smoothly on the other side. His eyes widened as he realized his speed, strength, and agility had far surpassed anything he had known before. Nero suddenly stiffened, his ears twitching. A split second later, a wolf-like shadow creature lunged from the darkness. Lin reacted too slowly. His stance was wrong. He knew instantly he couldn't block it. Certain death loomed, and he shut his eyes, bracing himself. The impact came, but not as expected. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the forest. Lin felt pressure on his arm, but no pain. Opening his eyes, he saw the creature recoil in terror. Its teeth had shattered upon biting him. The shadow wolf whimpered, backing away before fleeing into the darkness. Lin stared at his uninjured arm, stunned, his breath trembling as he realized something had fundamentally changed within him. Kay examined his arm carefully and froze. There was no wound, not even a mark. His breathing slowed as disbelief took hold. An attack that should have torn him apart had done nothing. Staring at his hands, he finally understood. This toughness, this overwhelming resilience, this was color, the very power he had been chasing his entire life. Before he could think further, the ground began to shake violently. Nero stiffened, ears snapping upright, and Kay followed the cat's gaze just as an enormous shadow rose from the darkness. A gigantic figure hauled itself over the ridge, its single glowing eye burning with hostility. Kay's blood ran cold as he recognized the creature. A cyclops. His mind raced, wondering why a monster that normally lived deep within the Black Forest had wandered this far out. The cyclops raised its massive arm and smashed it into the ground. The impact exploded outward, sending rocks and debris flying. Nero cried out, but Kay remained sitting amid the destruction. The blow had been heavy, far heavier than anything he had ever endured, but he was alive. More than that, a confident smile slowly spread across his face. For the first time, he realized he could actually win. Fragments of his past surged through his mind. Standing alone as a child, being rejected again and again, always told he didn't belong. He clenched his fist, acknowledging that he had finally grasped the strength he had dreamed of. Things would not stay the same anymore. Power surged through his arm as he tightened his grip. He straightened his back and planted his feet firmly into the ground, deciding he would not run again. Shadows gathered around him, drawn to the strange force awakening inside. In an instant, darkness swallowed his form, reshaping him into a being made entirely of shadow, his white eyes glowing intensely within the black silhouette. The cyclops roared and lunged forward, reaching out to crush the small figure before it. Kay exploded off the ground, launching himself upward with terrifying force. He twisted midair and drove his fist forward. The punch landed. The cyclops shattered. Its massive body disintegrated into fragments as a violent shockwave tore through the forest, flattening trees, and clearing the land in every direction. Kay flew through the air, surrounded by debris, still wrapped in shadow. Then something changed. The darkness peeled away from him without warning. His eyes widened as the world around him transformed. Bright sunlight poured down over a vibrant forest, waterfalls glistening below. Colors burst into view so vividly that it took his breath away. Just as suddenly, the power vanished. His hair turned white once more. Fear struck instantly. Gravity reclaimed him. Kay screamed as he fell, crashing violently into the forest below. He dragged himself free from the wreckage, Nero hovering anxiously above him. Kay dropped to his knees, gasping for breath as the remaining traces of shadow bled out of his body like smoke. Horror crept in as he felt it clearly now. His color was draining away. Panic tightened his chest. He understood the cost at last. The stronger the power he used, the faster it disappeared. If he kept going like this, he would be left completely helpless. The world suddenly went dark. A voice echoed deep within his mind, cold and commanding, asking why he was hesitating. It told him the prey was already before him and demanded that he consume it. Kay looked down at the scattered remains of the cyclops. The voice pressed on, asking if he wanted to live, urging him to reach out his hand. Sweat rolled down his face as exhaustion threatened to pull him into unconsciousness. The voice continued, relentless. His vision blurred, his eyes faintly glowing as survival instinct took over. Trembling, Kay obeyed. He extended his hand and pressed it against the monster's remains. The moment he made contact, something activated. Dark energy surged outward as the shadow lingering within the cyclops was forcibly drawn into him. Nero stared in stunned silence as a towering pillar of black light erupted from the forest, shooting straight into the sky. When the light finally faded, Kay collapsed against a rock, breathing heavily. The crushing exhaustion lifted, replaced by strength. His hair had turned black once again, his energy restored. He tilted his head back and stared at the sky, releasing a long breath of relief. He was alive, and for the first time he knew he was going to survive. Back at the Mari workshop, the atmosphere is calm and ordinary. Mari is bent over her workbench, studying a blueprint when the bell above the door rings softly. She looks up and freezes. A tall figure wrapped in a tattered cloak stands silently in the doorway, their face hidden beneath a deep hood. Forcing a polite smile, Mari greets the stranger, though her hands tremble slightly. She asks if they need something, but the figure offers no response, only radiating an unsettling presence. The cloaked stranger steps forward. Mari's unease grows into fear, and she points at him, blurting out that he looks extremely suspicious. When he keeps approaching, panic takes over. She snatches up a heavy wrench from the table and warns him loudly to stop, threatening to swing if he comes any closer. Suddenly, the figure lunges forward. Mari screams, squeezing her eyes shut as she braces for the worst. Instead of an attack, the figure stops short. A familiar voice tells her to relax. The hood is pulled back, revealing a face she knows all too well. Kay scratches the back of his head awkwardly and tells her it is really him, admitting that even he barely recognizes himself now. Mari lowers the wrench slowly, staring at him in disbelief. Her eyes widen, her mouth opens, and then she explodes into a loud scream, demanding to know what on earth happened to him. Still trembling, Mari clutches a metal pipe, her shock quickly turning into fury. She grabs another tool, shouting that whoever did this to him will pay dearly. Swinging the tools wildly, she yells that she will smash their heads in. Kay hurriedly steps in, waving his hands and insisting that he is fine, trying desperately to calm her down. Once it finally sinks in that Kay is truly standing in front of her, Mari sets the wrench aside. She exhales shakily and admits she panicked because she lost contact with him and feared the worst. Her anger fades into relief, and she smiles softly, telling him she is just glad he is alive. Kay apologizes quietly for worrying her. Inside, Kay can hardly believe his own situation. Falling into toxic ink, surviving, and awakening a color all sound absurd even to him. He voices one concern, pointing out that his color is black, something often associated with monsters, and wonders if others will look at him differently. After a moment, he shakes his head, deciding it doesn't matter. What matters is that he finally has a chance. He declares that he will head straight to the Pioneering Corps entrance exam and thanks Mari sincerely for everything she has done. He then awkwardly asks if he can borrow some clothes, promising to return them later. Mari sighs dramatically, asking how many times he plans to beg. Still, she smiles and waves it off, calling it an investment in a future colorist. Without warning, she grabs his hand and drags him along, announcing cheerfully that she has just the thing for him. Kay stumbles after her, completely caught off guard. The scene transitions to a massive Colosseum-like structure, where a crowd of hopeful pioneers steadily marches up wide stone steps. Inside, hundreds of candidates gather on a vast floor divided into large white square platforms, all waiting for the entrance exam to begin. Among them, 3 young men stand close together, whispering nervously. One of them, a blue-haired man wearing the number 183 on his chest, tries to reassure his anxious companion. The pink-haired friend can hardly believe they have made it this far, about to challenge the entrance test of the legendary S-Rank Dawn Pioneering Corps. This corps is famous for its feats in the Black Lands and is seen as the city's greatest hope. Still, the candidates can't ignore how many powerful competitors are present. They point out a woman with long turquoise hair, rumored to be the daughter of a renowned color family, standing beside a man wearing a beanie. They also notice other promising figures, including a pink-haired boy with goggles and a man in a gas mask. Despite all this talent, they agree that one person stands out above the rest. Their eyes land on a young man with wild green hair and sharp, predatory eyes. This is Gale, known as the Gale Sword. Many believe his success is guaranteed, as rumors claim he can defeat dangerous creatures on his own. However, he is equally infamous for his violent temperament, which supposedly led to his expulsion from his previous corps. Laughing arrogantly, the blue-haired man with number 183 claims he isn't afraid of someone like Gale. A shadow suddenly looms behind him. Gale is standing there, expression cold, daring him to repeat himself. The blue-haired man stiffens, fear draining the color from his face. Gale looks down on them with open disdain, calling them pathetic children. With a bored sigh, Gale turns and walks away, muttering that the quality of competitors is laughably low for an S-rank exam. As his gaze sweeps over the crowd, he mentally dismisses nearly everyone, until he pauses. His eyes narrow as they settle on the turquoise-haired girl. He recognizes her immediately as Ellie Cayenne, the second daughter of the Cyan family. A smirk curls across his lips as he admits she is at least worth noticing. Imagining the upcoming test, Gale wonders with anticipation how the rest of them will react once it truly begins. A metallic speaker crackled sharply, cutting through the noise of the arena and demanding everyone's attention. Gale and Ellie both turned toward the stage as the announcement rang out, declaring that the entrance examination for the Dawn Pioneering Corps had officially begun. Standing atop the podium was a man with striking blonde hair and sharp yellow eyes. He calmly announced that the test would start immediately. A wave of gasps swept through the candidates as they recognized him. He was a renowned colorist from the Dawn Corps, a hero who had played a major role in a recent large-scale creature extermination. Excited whispers spread through the crowd. If someone of his stature had personally come to oversee the exam, it meant the Corps was taking this recruitment extremely seriously. The pressure radiating from him alone made it clear that S-rank pioneers existed on an entirely different level. The examiner scanned the crowd and welcomed them briefly. He acknowledged that everyone present had their own reasons for applying, wealth, influence, glory, or a sense of duty, but stated flatly that none of that truly mattered. His gaze sharpened as he explained that, in the end, only strength decided a person's worth. The Dawn Corps sought individuals powerful enough to step into the Black Lands and reclaim territory for humanity. Mediocrity, he said coldly, had no place here. With a sweep of his arm, he pointed toward the large square platform spread across the arena floor. The first test, he announced, would be a tournament. Combat ability was the foundation of a pioneer's survival, because the world beyond the city walls was merciless. Only those who could fight would live. He ordered the candidates to demonstrate their power and instructed them to step forward when their numbers were called. Advancement would be decided solely by victory. The speaker rang out again, calling the first pair, number 126 and number 286. Gale, bearing the number 126, stepped onto the stage with a grim expression. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Many recognized him instantly and pitied whoever had drawn him as an opponent so early. Gale, on the other hand, grinned sharply. He welcomed the opportunity, thinking it was fortunate to have entertainment right away after being bored for so long. His eyes gleamed as he wondered how thoroughly he should crush his opponent. That was when he noticed the other contestant approaching. A cloaked figure wearing number 286 walked forward silently. Gale frowned, finding the sight unsettling. From his perspective, the man's posture looked awkward and unimpressive, almost clumsy. Deciding words were unnecessary, Gale wrapped his hand around his sword hilt. With a sharp metallic ring, he drew the blade and released his power without restraint. Green currents of wind burst outward as he swung, filling the air with cutting pressure. Spectators watched in awe as multiple glowing blades of wind formed around him. Whispers erupted, praising his mastery. Even at his age, he was already wielding advanced techniques, truly deserving of the title Gale's Sword. Gale locked his gaze onto the cloaked opponent and taunted him silently, daring him to defend. Stomping the ground, He gathered explosive momentum and surged forward, enveloped in a raging vortex of wind. The force of his charge alone seemed capable of tearing flesh apart. The hooded figure did not move. As Gale leapt into the air and brought his blade crashing down with a roar, the cloaked man stepped in calmly and threw a single left punch. The sound of impact echoed through the arena. Gale's body was hurled backward like a broken doll. Screams erupted from the stands as he smashed into the far wall, cracks spreading outward in a web-like pattern. His body slumped forward, completely unconscious. The match had ended in one strike. Silence fell. The hooded fighter lowered his arm and flexed his wrist slightly, muttering that the sudden burst of movement had startled even him. His hood slipped back, revealing messy black hair. This was Kay. Before anyone could process the outcome, a spectator suddenly screamed and pointed at Kay, not at the defeated Gale, but at the energy surrounding him. It was black. The blonde examiner narrowed his eyes, his expression turning grave. That color was identical to the energy wielded by creatures. Even Ellie Cayenne stood frozen in shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. A human wielding black color, was that even possible? Kay stood alone at the center of the arena, completely unaware of the storm he had just unleashed. Murmurs spread rapidly as people whispered that perhaps the reason the Gale's sword had fallen in one blow was this strange, ominous power. Kay looked around nervously at the staring crowd, confused by their reactions, and wondered quietly if he had done something wrong. The tournament pressed on with one fierce clash after another. In one battle, a shaking candidate desperately hurled razor-sharp stones through the air, but Kay surged forward without hesitation. He slipped between the attacks with ease, closed the gap in an instant, and drove his fist straight into the opponent's chest. The mage was sent flying across the arena, knocked unconscious before he even hit the ground. The announcer quickly declared Kay the victor. The pattern repeated itself. Another challenger was smashed into the floor with overwhelming force, while a third barely had time to react before being knocked out cold. Kay's victories were swift, brutal, and absolute. High above the arena, the blonde examiner watched closely, his interest growing by the second. He openly declared that Kay was the most outstanding applicant by far. With clear excitement, he remarked that this was the first recorded black holder and insisted that the Corps had to secure him immediately, before word spread beyond control. At that moment, slow, heavy footsteps echoed nearby. A relaxed voice commented that it seemed like a busy day. The blonde examiner turned sharply and froze when he saw who had arrived, the red-haired man and the blue-haired woman from the explosion investigation. Surprised, he asked why Team Leader Red was present. The red-haired man waved it off casually, saying they were merely passing through. They briefly exchanged words about the investigation into the strange creature incident. The red-haired leader sighed, admitting there had been no real progress. He then shifted the topic, asking if there were any promising candidates. The examiner mentioned the young woman from the Cayenne family and added that there was one exceptionally unusual participant. Suddenly, the red-haired leader's expression changed. His eyes locked onto the arena as he sensed something familiar. He spotted Kay immediately, his gaze narrowing at the black energy surrounding the boy. As the examiner continued praising Kay, the red-haired man remained silent, studying him carefully. The blue-haired woman leaned closer and whispered, asking if the boy could be related to their investigation. The leader confirmed it was very likely. A new color emerging right after the Shadow District incident was far too suspicious to ignore. He decided to observe Kay closely for now. Completely unaware of the attention, Kay stared at his clenched fist, dark energy curling around it like smoke. Excitement filled him as he realized that becoming a pioneer was finally within reach. Still, he remembered the severe strain his transformation caused and warned himself not to push too far. If his power vanished mid-battle, he would be utterly helpless. Suddenly, an overwhelming wave of freezing air swept across the arena. A towering wall of ice formed instantly. Standing calmly within the mist was Ellie Cayenne. The announcer declared number 17 the winner, revealing that her opponent had been frozen solid in a block of ice. The spectators erupted into chatter, marveling at the overwhelming strength of the Cayenne family's color. Kay watched in awe, wondering how anyone could stand against magic like that. As Ellie descended the stairs, she passed Kay and stopped. Her sharp blue eyes locked onto him, studying him with clear suspicion. Without saying a word, she turned away and continued on, leaving Kay unsettled and confused. The announcer announced that the first examination had ended. The blonde examiner stepped forward, thanking everyone for their efforts. Due to time constraints, he explained, they would proceed directly to the next test. The eliminated candidates were ordered to leave, many doing so with defeated expressions. As the examiner began to explain the second test, a hand landed firmly on his shoulder. The red-haired man stepped forward with a confident smile and took over. He announced that the next examination would be personally conducted by him. The remaining candidates stared in shock, immediately recognizing colorist Red, one of the Shining City's strongest warriors. Fear spread through the crowd. His reputation was infamous. Rumors claimed his power was so destructive that even allies kept their distance, and that whenever he led an exam, no one survived it. The blonde examiner hesitated, warning him that changing the test format would anger the captain. Red laughed it off, saying he was used to being scolded. He declared the test simple: endure. Flames erupted from his body in an instant. A massive wave of fire rolled forward, forming individual spheres around each candidate, trapping them inside blazing prisons. Panic erupted as the heat surged. Red explained calmly that he had recreated the environment of a certain region in the Black Lands and added that it would get rather warm. He dismissed the flames as nothing more than a heated stove, reminding them that the real Black Lands were far worse. If they endured, they passed. If not, they never deserved to become pioneers. Inside the fire barriers, screams echoed. Some candidates pounded helplessly at the walls, realizing escape was impossible. Others trembled in terror, wondering what kind of hell existed beyond the city if this was considered mild. Watching from the sidelines, the blonde examiner noted with all that Red's control was as precise as ever, capable of restraining so many people simultaneously. A sharp cracking sound suddenly cut through the air. Red and his assistant turned just in time to see one fire sphere turn blue before shattering completely. Ice exploded outward as Ellie Cayenne stepped free, standing tall amid the frozen shards. Red acknowledged her calmly, nodding that it was impressive. While ice naturally countered fire, his power usually overwhelmed such advantages. After a moment of consideration, he admitted she truly deserved to be called a prodigy. His attention then shifted to the other candidate of interest. Inside another fire sphere, Kay stood perfectly still. Red observed him briefly, unimpressed, assuming the boy wouldn't last much longer. Inside the barrier, however, Kay was panicking. He realized he had used too much of his power earlier. His black energy was leaking rapidly, draining faster under the intense heat. A horrifying thought struck him. If his color vanished here, he would be exposed as colorless and likely become an experiment. Desperation set in. His gaze locked onto the raging fire around him. A reckless idea formed. Since the barrier itself was created by color, he wondered if it could be absorbed. He didn't know the limits of his ability, but he had no choice. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his hand against the wall of flames. Instantly, the fire warped violently. Shock ran through Kay as he realized it was working. A massive vortex of black energy erupted from his body, tearing the red flames apart and dragging them into his hand. Nearby candidates screamed in disbelief. From the podium, both Red and the blonde examiner stared down in stunned silence. Red broke into a tense smile, sweat forming on his brow, and muttered that they had just discovered a truly dangerous lunatic. Kay stood at the center of the arena as the remaining energy slowly faded away. Red and black power still lingered around his hands, twisting together in a frightening display. The crowd had fallen completely silent, yet inside, Kay was anything but calm. His heart was racing and panic clawed at his chest. He forced an awkward smile, thinking bitterly that this was not how things were supposed to go. Instead of blending in, he had drawn far too much attention to himself. Ellie Cayenne remained motionless, staring at him as if the world had frozen. For a moment, she wondered whether her eyes were deceiving her. Black was that truly a color a human could wield. The idea unsettled her deeply. Anxiety crept into her chest as she observed the young man wrapped in unfamiliar darkness. Years of pressure and expectation surged through her mind, and unwillingly she acknowledged the truth. He was strong. Strong enough that even if she fought at full power, victory would not be guaranteed. As Kay walked away, Ellie felt a chill. There was something about him that went beyond raw strength. Shaking her head, she tried to push those unsettling thoughts aside. Colorist Red casually slung an arm over Kay's shoulder, as if they were old acquaintances. With a relaxed grin, he told him that things would not be so easy next time. He remarked that the way K's black power swallowed everything was fascinating, and he could not suppress his curiosity. Suggesting they talk somewhere private, Red guided K away, claiming it was for K's own protection, though his eyes clearly said otherwise. K, sweating profusely, nervously asked about the exam. Red laughed and told him it was obvious he had passed. Hearing that, K froze. The realization hit him hard. His reckless display had actually secured his dream. Emotion welled up inside him as he finally accepted that he had become a pioneer. From behind them, the blonde examiner shouted angrily at Red for interfering without permission. Red waved it off, laughing and asking for forgiveness just this once. With a tired sigh, the examiner addressed the crowd, announcing that the exam would continue despite the disruption. He confirmed that number 17, Ellie, had passed outright for breaking the barrier, while the remaining candidates would face another test. Ellie barely heard the announcement. Her eyes were fixed on the dark passage, where Kay was being led away. The scene shifted to an industrial zone. Red stood beside a vehicle with Kay, while the blue-haired investigator waited silently in the driver's seat. Red told her to stay put. Kay glanced around, and his blood ran cold. Before him stretched a field of shattered ground and ruined structures. He recognized it instantly. This was the place where he had been thrown into the ink waste. Red surveyed the wreckage with a grim expression, commenting that it was an eyesore. He explained that a serious incident had occurred here. Kay stiffened as Red continued, stating that for the first time ever, 2 pioneers had been discovered completely drained of their color. Witnesses had even reported the appearance of a massive creature. Turning sharply, Red fixed his gaze on Kay. He pointed out the timing was far too convenient. A mysterious creature appeared, and shortly after, the first human with black color emerged. Red called it a coincidence, but his glowing eyes said he didn't believe it. He described Kay's power as something that devoured other colors entirely. This ability, Red stated calmly, doesn't belong to this system at all. Kay's thoughts spiraled. He realized Red had suspected him from the very beginning. For a fleeting moment, he considered running, but the crushing aura in front of him erased that idea instantly. Escaping a hero was impossible. Then unexpectedly, Red burst out laughing. The tension shattered. He waved dismissively, saying he was only probing Kay's reaction, though he complained that Kay's honesty ruined the fun. Kay stared at him, confused and unsure. Red explained that while the investigation was his official duty, what truly interested him was Kay himself. Normally, color abilities were absolute. They never mixed, never merged. Yet Kay's power ignored those rules entirely. Red pointed out that during the second exam, Kay clearly lacked proper control. Kay tried to explain, but Red cut him off. Crimson light flared around Red's body as he announced they would conduct a test. Kay blinked in confusion. Red extended his hand and said he needed first-hand confirmation. Smiling confidently, he challenged Kay to absorb his power. Panic surged through Kay as he tried to refuse, warning that it was dangerous. Red only laughed, telling him it was far too early to worry about someone at his level. His tone hardened as he ordered Kay to stop talking and act. Black was known as the Black Lance, a force that consumed everything without exception. Red understood how dangerous such a power could be. Allowing it to exist unchecked could destabilize the entire Shining City. A darker thought crossed his mind. Few people knew this truth yet, but humanoid creatures existed. If Kay ever became one or faced one, Red knew he might be forced to act. Feeling the overwhelming pressure radiating from the colorist, Kay let out a slow breath. Even so, he nodded. Accepting the test, he reached out and grabbed Red's wrist, nervously asking him to promise that if something went wrong, the blame would not fall on him. As he spoke, black energy began to rise from his body once more. The instant their hands connected, the air twisted violently as a shockwave rippled outward. Kay sucked in a sharp breath as scorching red energy surged straight into his arm, crashing against the black aura surrounding him. His heart sank with immediate regret. Flames detonated from the point of contact, engulfing him completely, and a scream tore from his throat as unbearable heat coursed through his body. He cried out for Red to stop, admitting in panic that he couldn't control it, that it felt like molten lava was flooding his veins. Through the blazing inferno, Red appeared like a towering deity forged entirely from fire, reinforcing why he stood among the city's greatest heroes. Red remained calm within the flames, observing with sharp focus. He quickly realized that Kay's black energy was continuously devouring his power, acting like something starving beyond restraint. Because the ability was still immature, Red could resist it. but he knew without doubt that an ordinary colorist would have died instantly. As the firestorm roared, Red's curiosity deepened. What Kay had shown during the exam was clearly not the full extent of this power. What truly fascinated him wasn't just absorption, but what happened after the color was taken. The energy spiraled out of control. Red watched as the black aura around Kay's arm began to distort, growing jagged as it fused with the red energy. Then a violent eruption of crimson and darkness exploded outward, forcing Red several steps back. Smoke billowed through the ruins, and from within it emerged a horrifying sight. Kay had partially transformed. The right side of his body was encased in grotesque armor made of condensed red and black energy, shaped into a clawed, demonic form. Red clenched his teeth. The silhouette was unmistakable. Staring at the glowing eye and monstrous limb, he admitted silently that anyone would mistake this form for a creature. At that moment, his suspicion hardened into certainty. Kay had been at the center of the incident where the pioneers lost their color. Kay swayed on his feet, barely conscious. Red shifted his stance, deciding the situation could no longer continue unchecked. He gathered a blazing sphere of fire, preparing to suppress Kay by force before things escalated further. But then Kay let out a low, feral growl. Red froze, sensing resistance, not against him, but against something far deeper. Inside Kay's mind, he stood in an endless void drowned in darkness. Enormous red letters burned across his vision, screaming demands for more color, more energy. The voices howled hungrily, urging him to stop resisting and take everything available. In the real world, Kay gasped and trembled as the whispers clawed at his thoughts. They mocked his restraint, calling it wasteful, insisting he consume it all. Kay screamed back in his mind, ordering them to shut up. With sheer willpower, his remaining eye glowed crimson as he crushed the voices down. He forced the chaotic energy inward, compressing it violently. A shockwave burst outward as the power obeyed. The jagged armor shattered and dissolved into nothing. Silence followed. Kay dropped to one knee, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Red stared at him with genuine astonishment. Suppressing that level of power alone was something even veteran colorists would struggle to accomplish. Kay's heart hammered wildly as he tried to understand what had just happened. He couldn't believe he'd survived, or that he'd nearly lost himself. Fear crept in as he realized he had gone berserk in front of someone like Red. Steeling himself, he took an unsteady step forward, knowing he needed answers. Red, however, looked thrilled. He laughed, admitting the power Kay absorbed was far stronger than anticipated. Still, he declared the experiment a success, with a grin, because it had been fun. He reminded Kay that anyone aiming for greatness would have to accept danger along the way. Red then waved his hand, saying the test was over. But after a pause, his tone shifted. He reminded Kay that he was the investigator assigned to the destruction of this very district. With a calm yet chilling smile, he pointed out that Kay fit the profile of the culprit perfectly. Kay's blood ran cold. Red explained further. Witnesses had seen a massive shadow creature, and interest in the case ran far deeper than Kay realized. Once word spread about a human wielding black power, suspicion would fall naturally on him. Red gestured toward the ruined landscape, noting the damage would cost hundreds of millions to repair. If the city deemed Kay too dangerous, exile, or worse, would be inevitable. Kay clenched his fists, frustration burning in his chest. He knew the truth didn't matter if he couldn't prove it. Then Red offered a way out. If Kay agreed to operate under his command, Red said, he might be able to intervene. Kay didn't hesitate for even a heartbeat. He bowed deeply, nearly folding in half, loudly declaring that he placed himself entirely under Red's authority. Red raised a hand, telling him to listen first. He clarified that protection wouldn't come free. In exchange, Kay would owe him favors in the future. He asked calmly if Kay believed he could handle that. Kay forced a trembling smile. Inside, he screamed that anything was better than prison, debt, or becoming a test subject. Without hesitation, he agreed, promising to do whatever Red required. In the bleak wasteland, a tiny creature trembled as a massive wheel crashed down beside it, missing by mere inches while a heavily armored transport thundered past. The vehicle pushed through the fog-filled terrain of the Black Lands, its engine roaring against the dead silence. Inside the truck, Kay stared out through the reinforced window, realizing this was the farthest he had ever traveled. For the first time, it truly felt like he had stepped onto the path of a pioneer. His thoughts were abruptly cut short by a hostile glare. Gale, his green hair bristling with irritation, shot Kay a sharp look and sneered, calling him black-haired one. He snapped that Kay was annoying and told him to shut up, even though Kay hadn't said a single word. Kay blinked in confusion, unsure how he had provoked him. The transport bay felt suffocating. Kay shifted awkwardly, thinking that starting his pioneer career immediately should have felt exciting, yet the tension in the air was unmistakable. He glanced at Gale, seething with rage, and then at Ellie Cyan, who sat silently with a cold expression. A quiet doubt crept into his mind. Was joining this team really a good idea? His thoughts drifted back to the day before. Red had asked him if he was prepared to join the exploration mission, explaining that he needed Kay to head toward a specific location in an unexplored zone. When Kay hesitated, Red laughed easily and told him not to overthink it. He showed Kay a map and reassured him that he wouldn't be alone. Other recruits who passed the exam would be deployed nearby, and the official route would be announced soon. Kay's only task was to arrive on time. Returning to the present, Kay noticed that everyone was already seated in the transport. Because Red's involvement had disrupted the original exam, the candidates were given another opportunity. After additional rigorous testing, many skilled participants, including Gale, had passed. Ellie Cyan, the highest-ranked rookie, had joined Red's squad by her own request. Gale's eyes burned as he stared at Kay. The memory of his humiliation still gnawed at him. He convinced himself that his defeat was nothing more than a momentary lapse and swore it would never happen again. He muttered a threat under his breath, warning Kay to be ready once the exploration was over, adding bitterly that if Raven hadn't been present, Kay would already be dead. Ellie Cyan cut in coldly, telling Gale to stop embarrassing himself. She mocked him, saying he would probably go down in one hit again. Gale snapped back furiously, demanding to know what she meant. Ellie brushed him off without looking at him, stating flatly that Gale was no match for Kay. Kay turned toward Ellie with surprise and a faint sense of relief, thinking she might be someone reasonable. That hope vanished instantly. Ellie's sharp gaze shifted to him as she mentioned a past agreement in a tone that made no sense to him. She told him bluntly that the loser should stay quiet and follow orders. Kay stood there, completely baffled, caught between two openly hostile teammates. Letting out a quiet sigh, he realized managing this team would not be easy. The transport eventually crossed the dark waters of the wasteland and approached a distant facility. It rolled into a busy loading dock where workers hurried about with supplies. Once disembarked, Kay, Ellie, Gale, and the other recruits stepped into the forward base of the Dawn Pioneering Corps. Kay looked around in awe at the scale of operations. The sheer volume of resources made him realize just how different an S-rank corps was from his solitary ventures into the Black Lands. Without warning, someone poked Kay in the cheek. He turned to find Mari smiling brightly at him. She explained cheerfully that since this was his first mission, she insisted on coming along to support him. Opening her jacket, she revealed Nero had come too. Kay gently took the black cat, thanking Mari for looking after him. She smiled warmly, saying Nero was family, and added that she had been given a chance to join the expedition as support staff since her skills were valuable here. A loud announcement echoed across the base, calling everyone to assemble. As the pioneers gathered in the gray wasteland, the speaker announced that they would soon enter the Black Lands. Kay handed Nero back to Mari, asking her to take care of him. She warned him not to do anything reckless, and Kay smiled, promising he would come back safely. Mari hugged Nero tightly, but suddenly the cat slipped free from her arms. She gasped as Nero sprinted toward Kay and melted straight into the shadow at his feet. Mari froze, her eyes wide in disbelief. She stammered Kay's name, unable to understand what she had just seen. The group soon arrived at a heavily fortified cave entrance. At the front stood a woman with bright orange hair wearing a white coat. She shouted orders, announcing that a new batch of recruits was about to enter the Black Lands. She stressed that safety was the highest priority and warned that reconnaissance teams had detected unknown dangerous creatures in Area 21, a highly risky zone where the remains of an A-rank creature had recently been discovered. A male pioneer rushed up to her, calling her Arancia. Nervously, he reported that the Red team leader had brought the new recruits but had already broken formation without authorization. Arancia's eyes widened as she demanded confirmation. When the messenger nodded, she let out a weary sigh and muttered that man is causing trouble again. The group quietly slipped into a narrow canyon, deliberately breaking away from the main force. Colorist Red moved at the front, extending his hand into the darkness as if parting the shadows themselves. The small unit, Kay, Gale, Ellie Cyan, and Red, fully separated from the larger formation. Kay glanced back uneasily and asked if this was really acceptable, pointing out that the main army was heading in a completely different direction. Red replied calmly that their objective was elsewhere. Kay's unease deepened as he looked at Gale and Ellie, realizing the entire squad consisted of fresh recruits. Gale suddenly exploded in anger, demanding to know why he and Ellie were dragged along. He shouted that he had heard Red originally planned to bring only Kay, and he clearly felt insulted by being treated as an afterthought. Red merely smiled, his red aura flickering faintly as he explained that his personal guidance was not something handed out lightly. Allowing only Kay to receive it would be unfair. He added that while he had no intention of babysitting them, he also would not allow them to suffer serious harm. With that, he cut off the argument and ordered them to move. Not long after, Kay's eyes widened as hostile presences emerged. Deep within the cavern, shadowy creatures closed in from every direction. Red raised a lantern, illuminating the chaos as Kay, Gale, and Ellie were forced into battle. A massive wolf-like beast burst out of the darkness. Ellie Cyan reacted instantly, her blue energy blade piercing straight through the creature's body. She landed smoothly, her expression tightening as she fully grasped what fighting in the Black Lands truly meant. Surrounded by countless glowing eyes and endless pressure, she realized this was nothing like training. Tightening her grip on her sword, she resolved to control her stamina carefully. Casting a glance toward Kay, she silently vowed not to fall behind him. At the same time, Kay seized a shadow creature by the throat and crushed it effortlessly with his bare hand. Ellie Cyan froze in disbelief. She demanded to know why Kay wasn't using a dropper. Kay hesitated before admitting that he didn't own one. He explained they were far too expensive and added that he felt fine fighting without it. Ellie stared at him as if he had said something impossible. Gale reacted even more violently, shouting that it made absolutely no sense for a pioneer to have never used a dropper. Droppers were essential tools for pioneers, designed to infuse weapons with color energy in order to properly combat creatures. Without coloring a target, defeating such monsters should have been impossible. Yet there Kay stood, surrounded by fallen enemies, having crushed them with nothing but his hands. The contradiction left both Ellie and Gale shaken. Gale's grip tightened around his weapon as his hand trembled. The memory of the exam resurfaced, the humiliation of realizing he couldn't even injure someone who wasn't using a dropper. His frustration twisted into hatred as he stared at Kay's back, silently swearing that one day he would personally crush him. As they pressed deeper into the cave, Red continued leading with the lantern while Gale followed behind, simmering with rage. Red glanced back at the group, a faint smirk forming on his face. Watching two geniuses being pushed forward by a rookie wasn't a bad sight at all. His smile widened as he thought to himself that things were only going to become more interesting. In a relaxed tone, he urged them onward, saying they were almost at their destination, and suggesting they wrap things up quickly so they could celebrate afterward. After the clash with the shadow beasts, the remains of wolf-like creatures were scattered across the canyon floor. Colorist Red called for a short 10-minute rest, but he made it clear to Gale, Kay, and Ellie Cyan that this was only a pause and that the true objective still lay ahead. Gale let out an annoyed sigh, complaining that he had already burned through a large portion of his color. He took out a small vial filled with glowing green liquid and drank it without hesitation. Kay immediately recognized it as personal ink, an extremely refined alchemical substance used by pioneers to restore their color reserves. Because each bottle had to be customized to match the user's specific color, it was absurdly expensive. Kay watched silently as both Gale and Ellie replenished themselves, unable to hide a trace of envy. He briefly wished he could afford something like that, but quickly pushed the thought aside. Instead, he walked away from the group and approached the corpse of a fallen shadow creature. Reaching out, he activated his ability. Black energy surged violently from the body, spiraling into his palm as the shadow was absorbed directly into him. The dark power flowed through his veins, and Kay clenched his fist, feeling his strength fully return. He casually announced that he was back to full condition. When he turned around, he found Gale and Ellie staring at him in disbelief. Ellie cautiously asked whether he was truly fine. Kay waved off her concern, saying he had done this before. Gale, however, nearly shouted, unable to believe Kay had just absorbed a monster so effortlessly. Before the conversation could continue, Red cut in, stating that the break was over. The group moved deeper into the canyon until Red suddenly stopped and announced they had arrived. Ahead of them stood an enormous dome of swirling black energy, completely blocking the path. Kay stared at it and muttered that it looked like a massive black curtain. Red smiled at Kay's reaction and explained that this barrier was the very reason he had brought him along. To prove his point, Red condensed red energy into his palm and fired a powerful beam straight at the dome. The attack vanished the moment it touched the surface, swallowed entirely by the darkness. Red explained that any attempt to break the barrier by force only fed it, making it stronger. He pointed out the similarity to Kay's own ability and said he had suspected Kay would be the only one capable of removing it. Gesturing toward the wall, Red revealed that the path to the ruins lay beyond it, and that their true target, the Stella fragment, was hidden inside. Kay's eyes widened. Gale frowned, asking what a Stella even was, while Ellie admitted she had never heard of it. Red calmly assured them it was real and that the Shining City was desperate to obtain it. Then he turned to Kay and ordered him to erase the curtain. Stepping forward, Kay placed his hand against the wall of darkness. Instantly, his absorption ability activated. The black energy of the barrier surged violently into his arm, forming a massive vortex as the enormous dome began collapsing inward. Red, Gale, and Ellie watched as the obstruction was steadily devoured. Red's grin widened, satisfied that his gamble had paid off. As the barrier vanished, he remarked that Kay's power would be invaluable. Kay, however, looked anything but pleased. Sweat poured down his face as his body trembled under the strain of containing such an overwhelming amount of energy. Without warning, the ground began to quake. Gale and Ellie stiffened as the vibrations intensified, realizing the disturbance would draw monsters from all directions. The roar of collapsing energy echoed through the canyon, and moments later, black wolf-like creatures poured out from the cliffs. The group was surrounded. Ellie and Gale immediately drew their weapons, while Red laughed, commenting that they had quite the enthusiastic welcome. Red ordered Gale and Ellie to deal with the incoming enemies while Kay focused on finishing the absorption. His tone was cold and decisive as he commanded them to eliminate every creature. Gale moved first, his wind-infused strikes tearing through the shadows with blinding speed. Ellie followed, summoning towering ice spikes that erupted from the ground and skewered multiple beasts at once. Red observed calmly, nodding that although he had been ready to intervene, there was no need. With minimal effort, he formed red energy orbs and fired precise beams that pierced through the remaining monsters. Despite being new recruits, their combat ability was clearly up to standard. Meanwhile, Kay remained kneeling near the remnants of the barrier, sweat dripping as he struggled to stabilize the volatile energy flooding his body. Red watched with a satisfied smile, thinking how convenient it was to let his subordinates handle the dirty work. Kay sensed something unsettling. The power of the curtain felt disturbingly similar to his own. He realized the danger immediately. If his concentration slipped, the energy could reverse and drain his color instead. Gritting his teeth, Kay refused to yield, declaring silently that he would not be overpowered. With one last push of will, the absorption finally ended. Kay staggered to the edge of the newly cleared path, his breathing ragged as sweat streamed down his face. He confirmed aloud that the curtain's energy had been completely consumed. When he looked ahead, his heart sank. Beyond where the barrier once stood was not a corridor or chamber, but a colossal void, a bottomless pit of absolute darkness. Peering into it sent a chill through his spine. He wondered if this endless abyss was truly the entrance to the ruins. Regaining his composure, he turned back and reported to the team leader that the curtain had been successfully removed. Red nodded in approval, openly praising Kay for completing the task. He raised his voice, informing the others that the obstruction was gone and ordering them to finish off the remaining enemies. Without warning, Red's expression hardened. His instincts screamed danger. In a blur of motion, he lunged forward and seized both Ellie and Gale, yanking them backward with overwhelming force. A split second later, an unseen slash tore through the space they had just occupied. The invisible attack carved deep trenches into the canyon floor and obliterated the last of the shadow beasts. Rocks and dust rained down as Red landed safely on higher ground with Ellie and Gale in tow. Gale stared at the destruction in stunned silence, fully aware that he would have died instantly if Red had reacted any slower. Red exhaled grimly, realizing the earlier lack of resistance had a reason. Something far more terrifying had been driving the monsters away. He recalled intelligence reports warning of a powerful entity roaming nearby. As the dust settled, a lone figure emerged from the haze, walking toward them while dragging a massive blade along the ground. Red muttered that there was no longer any time to waste. The stranger stepped into view. His hair was split in color, white on one side, black on the other. Half of his face was covered by a dark, mask-like growth that looked fused to his flesh, and numerous weapons were strapped across his back. A suffocating pressure radiated from him as his cold gaze locked onto the pioneers. Red immediately positioned himself between the threat and his team. He barked orders, telling Kay and the others to listen carefully. Shoving a lantern into Kay's hands, Red issued a rapid command. They were to enter the ruins at once and secure the Stella fragment. Kay's eyes widened in alarm as he asked if Red seriously expected them to go down there alone. Red answered without hesitation, stating that their abilities were more than sufficient. Before anyone could object, Red released a violent burst of force. Kay, Ellie, and Gale were shoved toward the abyss as Red shouted at them to stop hesitating and move. Kay cried out Red's name as the three recruits plunged into the darkness below. Left behind, Red stood at the edge of the pit, his red aura blazing fiercely. One of the recruits, voices echoed faintly from the depths, asking what they were supposed to do on their own. Behind Red, the armed stranger closed in. The two powerful figures locked eyes in a silent confrontation, and Red knew the coming fight would be anything but simple. Far below, in the depths of the abyss, Kay lay sprawled on the ground. He groaned as pain shot through his body, clutching his head while struggling to rise in the oppressive darkness. Remembering the lantern Red had given him, he activated it, wondering if this was truly the ruins. Light burst forth. Kay froze. Instead of ancient stone halls, the lantern revealed the skeletal remains of enormous modern skyscrapers, shattered concrete structures, and collapsed roads stretching endlessly into the darkness. It looked like an entire city had been destroyed and buried beneath the earth. Standing on a narrow ledge, Kay lifted the lantern higher, illuminating more of the ruin. Words failed him as he stared at the underground graveyard of a modern metropolis. Kay stared at the underground city in disbelief. He muttered that a place like this shouldn't exist, then complained that the darkness made it impossible to see properly. Almost immediately, a familiar voice snapped at him to stop whining and move toward the light. Relief washed over him when he spotted Gale and Ellie nearby. He admitted honestly that he had been scared of being separated. Gale clicked his tongue and blamed Kay for dragging them into confusion, but Ellie cut him off sharply, saying he had been just as lost as anyone else. Gale scanned the endless ruins uneasily, asking what kind of place this even was. Anxiety crept into his voice as he pointed out how ridiculous it sounded to search for something called a Stella fragment in a city that stretched on forever. Kay nodded, agreeing that without any clue of what they were looking for, wandering around like this could take days, or worse. Deep down, Kay wished Nero were with him. Almost as if responding to his thoughts, a faint glow appeared near his feet. Kay's eyes widened when he saw the small black cat standing there. Panic struck him instantly as he wondered how Nero had managed to follow them down here. Ellie noticed the animal and asked cautiously if it was a creature. Kay felt cold sweat trickle down his back, fearing he had finally been exposed. Then he steadied himself. Instead of hiding, he decided this might be the perfect chance to show Nero's true value. Calling out to the others, Kay lifted the cat with confidence and announced that he actually had a reliable way to locate the Stella fragment. Gale immediately exploded in anger, calling it nonsense, but Ellie ignored him entirely. Her attention was completely captured by the cat. Before Kay could explain further, Nero let out a soft cry and sprang free. The moment it leapt into the air, its body dissolved into a swirling mass of light. A brilliant glow flooded the ruins, forcing all three of them to shield their eyes. The light then shot forward, forming a clear path through the darkness. They followed the glowing trail as it wound between shattered buildings. Gale muttered in disbelief, questioning how a creature could show intelligence on this level and demanding to know where Kay had found it. Kay ignored him, focusing instead on interpreting Nero's movements. He calmly stated that the Stella fragment was close, right ahead. The glowing shape suddenly darted away, racing toward a massive concrete structure. A dark tunnel yawned open at its base. Kay stared into it uneasily, wondering how far down they would need to go. Gale mocked him, asking if he was scared already. Kay shot back without hesitation and said they were going in. Inside, the corridor stretched wide and tall, with the faint glow of Nero lighting the way. Kay remarked that the facility was far larger than he had imagined. Suddenly, Nero stopped in front of a massive metal door, hovering there insistently. Kay realized it must have found something important. The silence was shattered by a thunderous metallic impact. A colossal mechanical foot slammed down in front of them. All three froze as a towering, rust-covered automaton rose into view. Gale frowned, nodding that this thing was nothing like the biological creatures they usually fought. A beam of light swept out from the machine, scanning Ellie first. Symbols appeared, identifying her blue color. The scanner moved to Gale next, registering green. Finally, the light fell on Kay. His heart sank as he realized it was analyzing their colors. The scan completed. The display changed, identifying absolute pitch black. Instantly, the automaton's eye flared brightly. In a distorted mechanical voice, it announced that it had detected the color of the Black Witch and classified Kay as a high-level threat. Elimination procedures began. Kay barely had time to react before a massive metal fist crashed toward him. The blow sent him skidding backward across the floor. Pain shot through his body, but he managed to block the worst of it. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself upright and glared at the machine. Shouting in anger and defiance, Kay declared that if the automaton wanted a fight, then he would not hold anything back. The towering automaton slowly lifted its enormous arm, metal joints groaning as it prepared to crush everything in its path. Kay rushed forward first, slamming his fist into the machine's forearm. Pain shot through his arm instantly, forcing him back. The impact barely dented the surface, and he realized with shock just how absurdly durable the armor was. Gale stared in disbelief as the robot pulled its arm back, readying another devastating strike. Ellie reacted quickly, darting in and thrusting her rapier toward the machine's torso. The blade struck true, but instead of cutting through, it bounced off with a shower of sparks. Ellie froze, staring at her weapon in disbelief. Not even a scratch remained on the metal surface. Panic flickered across her face as the terrifying thought set in that her color might be useless against something mechanical. While they struggled, Kay forced himself to stay calm and observe. His eyes locked onto the faint glow pulsing from the robot's chest. Inside the transparent casing, liquid energy churned violently. He understood immediately that was its core. Kay lunged again, aiming straight for the weak point. But the machine moved far faster than expected. Its arm swung sideways like a massive club, forcing Kay to twist his body mid-step and narrowly avoid being crushed. He skidded backward, breathing hard, frustration burning in his chest. Normal attacks weren't going to work. Then he remembered the sensation from before, the time his body had been consumed by black energy. Fully transforming again was too dangerous. The cost was too high. Instead, he made a decision. Kay drew in a deep breath and focused everything he had into his right arm alone. Dark energy condensed rapidly, wrapping his fist in a dense, pitch-black layer that pulsed like a living thing. The pressure was immense, but he held it together. With a sharp shout, Kay launched himself into the air. His empowered punch struck the robot dead center in its chest. The black-coated fist pierced straight through the armor and smashed into the glowing core. A violent shockwave erupted outward as the core shattered, sending fragments flying. The automaton's upper body exploded apart, its head tearing free and crashing to the ground as the light in its eye flickered and died. Silence fell. Kay landed heavily among the wreckage, breathing hard, then slowly let out a shaky sigh of relief. Gale and Ellie could only stare, speechless. As the dust settled, Kay noticed a spherical object rolling near his feet. He picked it up, realizing it was the broken core. He smiled faintly, thinking Mari would probably love something like this. His relief didn't last long. Gale suddenly shouted, demanding to know what that power was. He and Ellie closed in on Kay, firing questions at him non-stop. Kay stiffened, sweat forming on his brow, and awkwardly brushed it off by saying the technique consumed a huge amount of his color and wasn't something he could use freely. Before anyone could press further, a deep mechanical rumble echoed behind them. The massive metal door they had been standing near began to open on its own. Beyond it stretched an endless darkness, so deep it seemed to swallow light itself. Without warning, Nero shot out from the void, crying out anxiously. The cat hovered near Kay, trembling, clearly terrified. Kay followed Nero's gaze toward the doorway, an uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. He admitted he couldn't see anything inside, but stepped closer anyway. The moment his fingers touched the surface, the darkness rippled like liquid. Then everything exploded. Thick tendrils of shadow burst outward from the doorway, wrapping around all three of them. Gale and Ellie screamed as they were yanked forward, unable to resist the overwhelming force. Kay reached out instinctively, but it was useless. The darkness swallowed them whole. They fell, endlessly. When they finally hit the ground, Gale groaned loudly, cursing the fall and the suffocating blackness. He pushed himself up, rubbing his chest, then froze. His hands trembled as he stared down at himself. The vibrant green that once defined his power was gone. His jacket, his body, even his hands were now drained of all color, reduced to dull shades of black, white, and gray. Panic seized him as he grabbed at his chest in disbelief. Kay and Ellie stood beside him, equally horrified. The world around them had lost its color entirely. They stood in a lifeless monochrome space, surrounded by silence, staring at their own drained bodies, terrified and confused, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Far from the buried ruins, a lone scorpion crawled across the wasteland, its tiny shadow stretching beneath the distant glow of the shining city. Within the city's walls stood the Eastern Government Office. Inside, the chief slammed his desk in fury, demanding to know whether Kay had been found yet. A trembling subordinate reported that the boy was currently on an exploration mission under the supervision of colorist Red. He added carefully that Kay himself had requested that the authorities not interfere. The chief exploded in anger at the mention of black. He roared that allowing someone with such a dangerous color into the field was madness. Even if Red was a celebrated hero, this crossed a line. He ranted that recent creature sightings had already thrown the ruling council into panic, with whispers spreading that the catastrophic black wave might be starting again. If things went wrong, he knew the blame would fall squarely on him. As he raged, a woman with pink and yellow hair lounged nearby, smiling lazily. Chamalea, the leader of the Dawn Pioneering Corps, teased him for getting worked up again and warned that his blood pressure would land him in a hospital bed someday. She told him to calm down. Red, she argued, was not reckless. If anyone could keep an eye on a dangerous variable, it was him. Chamalea added that taking a risk like this could lead to unexpected gains. Stirring her tea, she remarked that trust mattered more than fear right now, though she grimaced at the bitter taste. The chief ignored her and dumped an absurd amount of sugar into the pot, muttering about how anyone could drink it otherwise. He snapped at her to focus. Chamalea's playful expression faded as she acknowledged the real issue. Black was feared because of the legend of the Black Witch. That color symbolized death, despair, and the first black wave, a catastrophe that nearly wiped humanity out. She reminded him how the world had once drowned in darkness, how creatures had flooded the land, and how the Black Lands were born. Another wave, she said quietly, was inevitable someday. With recent anomalies and the emergence of a black wielder, the situation could no longer be ignored. If humanity wanted to survive, they would need every possible strength, even black. She urged the chief to convince the council. The chief exhaled heavily, admitting it would not be easy. Still, as he stared at a dossier containing Kay's photograph, he murmured that perhaps the fate of the city truly did rest on that boy's shoulders. Meanwhile, in a boundless void of darkness, three figures stood outlined in faint white light. Kay, Gale, and Ellie stared around in confusion, unable to tell where they were. Panic overtook Gale as he pointed at his own body, screaming that his color was gone. He demanded to know why Kay still seemed unaffected. Kay replied flatly that he had no idea, suggesting it might be because his color was black, identical to the space around them. Gale suddenly doubled over, drained, while Ellie clutched her head as weakness washed through her. Kay watched in confusion. He felt completely fine. Slowly, he realized why. He had lived most of his life without color. This emptiness felt familiar to him. Gale muttered that something strange was happening inside his body. Squinting, he noticed a faint glow pulsing within his chest, like a hidden core. A chorus of whispers flooded the void. The three froze. Gale shouted into the darkness, demanding whoever was there reveal themselves. Kay listened carefully. The voices felt wrong, different from the one that usually haunted him. From the shadows, a woman's silhouette emerged. Her long hair flowed unnaturally, and her form looked neither fully solid nor entirely unreal. Kay sensed her presence instantly and turned. Gale and Ellie stood frozen, terror-stricken. She had appeared without warning. Slowly, the figure raised her hand and pointed directly at Kay. His vision shattered. Kay was dragged into a violent storm of images. He saw a city being swallowed by a spiraling vortex of power. The world bled red as towering monsters rampaged through ruined streets. A colossal eye opened in the sky, gazing down upon an army of shadow beasts. Among them loomed a horrifying, many-eyed entity. Then the woman's face filled his vision, one eye glowing as she stared straight into his soul. He found himself before an overwhelming sea of blue energy. Memory and reality blurred together. Deep within his mind, a voice from a brilliant light told him he needed a name. A smiling figure from his past appeared, gently calling him K and urging him to find his own color, his own light. The vision collapsed. K snapped back to reality with a sharp gasp, sweat pouring down his face. He staggered, clutching his head as the afterimages burned into his mind. He cursed under his breath, unable to understand why such horrific memories were surfacing now. Desperate, he tried to hold on to the fragments before they faded. One name echoed clearly in his thoughts. Lumielt. Kay frowned in confusion, whispering the name aloud, unsure of who or what it belonged to. Gale suddenly snaps. Losing all restraint, the swordsman screams into the darkness and swings his blade wildly, as if fighting enemies only he can see. Kay turns in alarm and realizes Gale's attacks are coming dangerously close to Ellie Cyan, who is crouched on the ground in terror. Gale shouts incoherently, completely detached from reality, while Ellie trembles and begs him to stop. Her pleas are ignored. His eyes have turned pitch black, blood leaking from their corners as the void drives him into madness. Ellie is no better. She clutches her head as black tears stream down her face, whispering apologies to her sister while reliving a painful memory. Kay watches the scene unfold, his expression darkening. He understands now, the space itself is attacking their minds. If they stay any longer, both of them will be lost. Just then, a familiar chirping sound cuts through the chaos. Kay looks up and sees a glowing white figure racing toward him. Relief washes over his face as he recognizes Nero. He quickly checks if the cat is unharmed. Nero circles him urgently before pointing toward the distance, clearly trying to guide him somewhere. Understanding the signal, Kay prepares to follow. Then he stops. Gale is still rampaging and Ellie is barely conscious. Kay clenches his fists. He cannot abandon them. Turning to Nero, he asks for help. In response, a brilliant wave of purifying light bursts outward from the cat, engulfing both Gale and Ellie. The black corruption evaporates under the glow. Gale's screams fade, his sword dropping from his hand, while Ellie's trembling subsides as the darkness drains away. Kay exhales in relief. He tells them to stay where they are and turns back toward Nero, deciding to scout ahead alone. He follows the trail of light through the endless darkness, growing irritated as nothing seems to change. As if mocking him, the whispering returns. A voice murmurs that no color can reach this place. Kay clicks his tongue in annoyance, muttering that riddles are the worst. Then he sees it. A distant, star-like glow pierces the void. Kay's irritation vanishes as excitement takes over. He breaks into a run, and as he approaches, his breath catches. Before him stands a massive stone structure crowned by a four-pointed star radiating holy light. There is no doubt in his mind, this is the Stella fragment. He notices that its shape and glow are unlike anything he imagined, wondering briefly if each fragment is different. Not wanting to waste time, he climbs the rocky base and reaches out. The moment his fingers touch it, the fragment reacts violently. Energy surges into his hand as his absorption ability activates on its own. Kay gasps, his body glowing as power floods him. Panic flashes through his mind. He never intended to absorb it. He prays the contact is brief enough not to cause problems. As the energy settles, the oppressive darkness collapses. The void peels away, revealing a vast chamber of gray stone. Kay stands alone at the center, staring at the light swirling in his hands. The black space is gone. He lets out a slow breath, reminding himself that the Black Lands never play by the rules. Behind him, Gale and Ellie regain consciousness. They stare at Kay as if he is a monster. Kay asks if they are all right, but Gale only points at him in accusation, while Ellie demands to know how he remained unaffected. Kay answers honestly, he doesn't know. He raises his hand and shows them the object. The swirling, multicolored light confirms it. This is the Stella fragment. The three gather around it. Gale scoffs, unable to believe something so small caused so much trouble. Ellie, however, is awestruck, sensing countless colors within it. Nearby, Nero floats silently, staring at the fragment with intense focus. Kay checks himself and confirms he feels fine, but Nero drifts closer, eyes locked on the glowing energy. Before anyone can react, the cat opens his mouth wide and swallows the Stella fragment whole. Time freezes. Kay's face twists in pure horror. Gale and Ellie scream at the same time, panic flooding their voices as they stare at Nero, demanding to know what kind of creature he really is. Gale lost his temper completely. Floating in midair, the black cat was scolded mercilessly as Gale shouted that the fragment was not food. In a fit of rage, he grabbed Nero and shook him violently, screaming for the creature to spit it out. Kay reacted instantly, shouting at Gale to let go of the cat and lunging to pull him away. Before the argument could escalate further, a sharp cracking sound echoed around them. Thin fractures spread rapidly across the walls and ceiling. Gale cursed bitterly, realizing that after everything they had gone through, the place was collapsing on top of them. The chamber began to cave in as chunks of stone rained down. Seeing the danger, Gale yelled for everyone to move. Kay clutched Nero tightly and ran alongside Ellie as the structure behind them crumbled. They barely made it into the corridor, escaping just as the room collapsed entirely. Elsewhere, a separate group of pioneers stood before the corpse of an enormous monster. Arancia, the orange-haired leader, crouched near the battlefield, examining a deep gouge carved into the ground. Her expression darkened as she traced the mark with her eyes. A blue-haired subordinate asked if she had found something troubling. Rising to her feet, Arancia confirmed grimly that the battle-mad lunatic had returned. She explained that the traces belonged to a humanoid monster known as the Sword Demon, one of the Black Witch's infamous hands. Every time it appeared, destruction followed. She suspected the recent surge in monster activity was no coincidence. When asked whether they should proceed, Arancia shook her head and ordered an immediate withdrawal. They had already secured enough materials, and she refused to gamble with the lives of the probationary pioneers. At that moment, a terrifying wave of power erupted nearby. A colossal explosion of crimson fire lit up a distant mountain. Arancia froze, instantly recognizing the color of the flames. Her eyes widened in shock. Only one person wielded fire like that. If Red was using such force, then the Sword Demon had to be there. Invisible slashes suddenly tore through the air toward her team. Arancia reacted without hesitation, shouting for everyone to scatter as a massive cutting wave surged forward. Drawing her oversized mechanical hammer, now glowing with molten orange light, she leapt into the air. With a fierce roar, she brought the hammer down. The collision between orange and black energy detonated in a violent explosion, completely canceling the attack. Landing steadily, Arancia ordered a full retreat. She instructed her deputy to escort the team back to the outpost, while she personally went to rendezvous with Red. In the next instant, she launched herself toward the blazing mountain. At the mountain peak, a cataclysmic duel was unfolding. Red and black energies clashed relentlessly as colorist Red, and the Sword Demon moved faster than the eye could follow. Their weapons collided again and again, filling the air with shockwaves. The demon conjured a massive spear of darkness, its single white eye burning with hostility, and hurled it forward. Red blocked the attack head-on, twisting his body to redirect the force. The Sword Demon pressed on, swinging a blade of shadows in a relentless assault, while Red focused entirely on defense. Suddenly, the demon sensed danger. The ground erupted beneath him as a towering pillar of red flame burst upward. He leapt away just in time, avoiding the inferno. Through the roaring flames, his eye remained locked on Red. Then a voice rang out from above, mocking Red for relying on bait tactics. Arancia descended like a meteor, her hammer raised high. Laughing wildly, she challenged the demon to dodge. Her hammer slammed down with overwhelming force, unleashing a devastating orange shockwave that crushed the demon into the earth. As the dust settled, Arancia landed lightly. Red greeted her calmly, remarking that she was late. She joked that she nearly died getting there, but he brushed it off. She admitted that even her strike hadn't been enough to finish the job. Right on cue, the Sword Demon rose from the rubble, completely unharmed, glaring at them with murderous intent. Red remained confident, stating that fighting would be easier now that Arancia was fully using her color. She snapped back, warning him not to hold back, and adding that none of the other colorists wanted to witness his true power. Red complained about her nagging, but she ignored him, activating her ability as glowing orange rings formed beneath her feet. Gripping her hammer, she declared they would bring down another of the witch's black hands. Across from them, the Sword Demon stood silently, fury swelling beneath his mask. Then, unexpectedly, strained voices echoed from a nearby cliff. Red's eyes widened, and even the demon paused in confusion. From above, Gale emerged over the ledge with Kay, Ellie, and Nero. Gale collapsed immediately, gasping that he never wanted to return to the underground ruins. Kay froze, a suffocating presence washed over him. He looked up and locked eyes with the Sword Demon. Behind the monster, Red and Arancia stood glowing with power. Realizing they had stumbled into an active battlefield, Kay's blood ran cold. Red and Arancia cursed under their breath and rushed forward, shouting for the trio to get out of the way. The sword demon ignored them, his gaze fixed on the weakest targets. In an instant, he charged straight at Kay, Gale, and Ellie. Acting on instinct, Gale raised his sword and Ellie drew her weapon despite their exhaustion. The demon swung once. Both weapons shattered instantly, reduced to fragments. Gale stared in disbelief as his reinforced blade broke like glass. Terror seized him. This was an enemy far beyond them. The sword demon raised his weapon again. A blade of white energy tore through the air. Without thinking, Kay threw himself forward, shielding his teammates. The slash came down cleanly, severing his left hand. Pain exploded through his body as he collapsed backward. Ellie screamed his name, and Gale shouted in horror. The demon pressed the advantage. He slammed his knee into Gale, sending him crashing aside, then seized Ellie by the throat and lifted her off the ground, using her as a shield. Red and Arancia arrived too late to intervene. The sword demon ordered them to stop, demanding a clear path and warning that he would kill the girl if they followed. He demanded they hand over the key, leaving the colorists stunned. Arancia roared in fury, demanding to know what he was talking about, while Red narrowed his eyes, weighing the situation carefully. Nearby, Kay lay face down in a pool of blood. Nero hovered above him, crying out desperately. Then Kay's remaining hand twitched. Slowly, he began to rise. A chilling pressure spread across the battlefield. The sword demon felt it and turned sharply, confusion flashing across his face. He stared at Kay's silhouette, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Black energy surged violently around Kay's body. The darkness condensed around his severed wrist, and before anyone could react, a new arm formed, entirely composed of writhing black power. Kay stood fully upright, his face hidden in shadow, radiating an overwhelming aura that made even the sword demon hesitate. The dark swordsman stared in disbelief, unable to understand how a human could possess such a terrifying black power. Kay's hand was now completely engulfed in darkness, radiating an overwhelming pressure that caused the surrounding space to tremble violently. A powerful suction force suddenly erupted, dragging the sword demon backward against his will. Captain Red and Arancia could only stand frozen, unable to comprehend the transformation happening before their eyes. Inside Kay's mind, a persistent voice echoed again and again, urging him forward, telling him to come closer without pause. The sound overwhelmed his thoughts, and in the blink of an eye, he had already closed the distance, completely seizing control of the battle. Seeing this, Red's expression turned grim as he realized something was wrong, muttering that Kay had been swallowed by the black. He could hardly believe that the young man before him had become something akin to those dreadful black hands. Kay's shadow-covered hand suddenly grabbed the sword demon's face, forcing out a scream of agony. The demon could feel something unnatural happening, as if his very existence was being torn away piece by piece. It wasn't an illusion or trick, but a real power that was devouring him from within. Within the thick darkness, Kay's eyes glowed with a menacing light as he fixed his gaze on his opponent. The sword demon trembled as a horrifying realization dawned on him, understanding that Kay was the key. From the darkness surrounding Kay, grotesque mouths filled with sharp teeth began to emerge, biting down relentlessly on the demon's body. There was no hesitation, no mercy, only destruction. The mouths devoured him with savage intensity, causing him to scream in desperation. Kay, unable to restrain the destructive force rising within him, declared coldly that he would start by tearing apart his arms and legs. That moment marked the beginning of the end for the sword demon. Still, the demon refused to give up. Summoning all his strength, he drew his sword and struck at Kay with full force. The clash released a violent shockwave that shook the land itself. Yet to his horror, the attack had no effect. The darkness surrounding Kay absorbed everything, leaving the demon stunned and trembling as the shadowy figure advanced toward him. Black tentacles extended outward, wrapping around him and pulling him deeper into a vortex of death. Facing his inevitable end, the sword demon could only accept it in despair, unable to believe his defeat would come like this. But just as the darkness was about to completely consume him, a powerful shout suddenly cut through the battlefield. In the middle of the chaos, Arancia descended from above, engulfed in blazing orange flames. Her massive hammer crashed down with immense force, releasing a world-shaking burst of energy as she declared that it was time for him to die. The impact struck the sword demon directly, forcing him to reassess the situation instantly. Realizing his objective of locating the key had already been achieved, he chose to retreat. As he leapt away, Arancia shouted in frustration, unable to believe he was escaping after causing such chaos. She cursed him angrily, furious that he would flee the moment he was at a disadvantage. Without hesitation, she reported his escape route to Red, who immediately moved. Determined not to let him get away, Red surged forward at incredible speed, catching up to the fleeing demon. His eyes burned with killing intent as he questioned where the demon thought he was going. Gripping the hilt of his blazing red sword, Red unleashed a powerful technique, a strike infused with intense chromatic flames that crashed down with overwhelming force. The ground shattered under the impact, and the sword demon groaned in pain as he realized the attack carried a power he could not ignore. The flames began to eat away at his body, preventing him from regenerating. For the first time, despair truly set in as he realized he could not recover from this damage. Red calmly declared that now the fight could begin properly, not giving his opponent a chance to react before rushing forward again and delivering another crushing blow. The sword demon was sent flying, his body barely holding together. Even so, he gritted his teeth and swore that this would not be the end. With that final declaration, he vanished into the darkness, escaping into the depths despite his injuries. A violent explosion marked his disappearance, leaving Red watching helplessly as the enemy slipped away. Arancia immediately urged Red to pursue him, eager to finish the fight, but Red stopped her at once. His expression was serious as he warned that going any deeper would be far too dangerous, bringing the pursuit to a halt despite the enemy's escape. Arancia looked resentful, her frustration clear as she said they had been so close to finishing him. Red, however, kept his eyes fixed on the deep chasm ahead, his expression grim as he explained that they couldn't go any further. Even with support, entering the depths of the chasm was far too dangerous, and this was as far as they could push. He couldn't hide his frustration, realizing that the Black Lands themselves had become a natural shield for their enemy. The new recruits approached hesitantly, apologizing as they felt they had only been a burden during the fight. Red quickly reassured them, telling them that surviving an encounter like that without any casualties was already a miracle. But despite his calm words, his attention soon shifted back to Kay, and a deep concern filled his gaze. Kay was still standing silently within the fatting black mist, unmoving. Red wondered if he was even conscious anymore. What troubled him more was the realization that Kay's power had reached a dangerous level, something that could easily spiral out of control. If Kay failed to master it, there was a real possibility that he could harm the people around him, and that thought weighed heavily on Red's mind. Then something strange caught his attention. The black energy surrounding them began to move unnaturally, as if being pulled toward Kay. Red narrowed his eyes in shock as he realized what was happening. Kay wasn't just standing there, he was absorbing the very essence of the Black Lands themselves. The dark energy from the ground surged toward him, swirling violently before being drawn into his body. Moments later, the thick layer of darkness began to fade, slowly revealing Kay's figure. His white hair became visible first, followed by his pale face. Everyone stood frozen, stunned by what they were witnessing. Red quickly rushed forward the moment Kay's eyes regained clarity, asking if he was awake. As soon as the darkness completely vanished, Kay collapsed to the ground, his body drained of all strength. Red caught sight of his pale, almost lifeless appearance and was shocked, realizing that Kay was colorless. The contradiction left him stunned, unable to understand how someone without color could possess such overwhelming and terrifying power. Arancia and the others could only stand there in silence, watching the young man who had just undergone such a frightening transformation. Meanwhile, deep within another corner of the Black Lands, the sword demon struggled to remain standing, his body badly burned by Red's fiery attack. His wounds still smoldered, the damage clearly beyond normal recovery. Suddenly, two blue-haired girls with mismatched eyes appeared nearby, their expressions filled with amusement as they observed his condition. One of them mocked him openly, pointing out the red burns covering his body and teasing him for picking a fight with someone like Red. She laughed at his obsession with battle, finding his reckless behavior almost entertaining. The sword demon, however, showed no interest in her words and coldly told her to leave him alone. Unfazed, the girl continued talking, commenting on Red's overwhelming power and suggesting that someone who fought like him would eventually destroy himself. As she kept rambling, something suddenly crossed her mind, and her tone shifted as she asked him why he hadn't answered her earlier question. She brought up the opening of the Black Witch's veil, pressing him to confirm whether he had seen it as well. Despite her persistence, the sword demon remained silent, unwilling to give her any information. In his mind, he had already decided to keep everything to himself. He knew that revealing the identity of the key, K, would only weaken his side. Instead, his greed took over, and he resolved that he would claim that power for himself. Realizing that he was deliberately hiding something, the blue-haired girl let out a sinister laugh. She pointed out that his silence only made things more obvious, confidently declaring that she would uncover the truth on her own. Based on his reaction alone, she had already concluded that the opening of the veil was connected to the people in the city. Determined to find answers, she decided to escalate the situation. Just as before, she began summoning monsters, sending them toward the city in search of clues. From the depths of the abyss, a massive shadowy entity slowly began to rise at her command. Watching it take form, she calmly declared that it was time to prepare for a rising tide. Returning from the Blacklands, the City of Light looked as radiant as ever, but inside the hospital room the atmosphere felt heavy and suffocating. Captain Red, Gale, and Ellie stood quietly beside Kay's bed, their eyes fixed on the unconscious young man lying there. Red felt a deep sense of guilt pressing down on him. He remembered the confidence he once had, the promise that he would not let anyone under his command get seriously hurt. Now that promise had been broken, and the weight of that failure refused to leave his mind. He looked down at Kay with regret and silently blamed himself for everything that had happened. Taking out his pocket watch, he stared at it for a moment, feeling a familiar sense of helplessness. No matter how much time passed, it felt like he still had not changed anything. Even as a top-tier colorist, he questioned what kind of hero he truly was. Seeing their captain lost in his thoughts, Gale tried to ease the tension. He pointed out that considering how dangerous missions usually were for new recruits, the fact that everyone had survived was already a rare outcome. If anything, it was thanks to Red and the others that things had not turned out far worse. Even so, Red remained silent, unable to fully shake off the guilt. Nearby, Mary watched everything unfold with confusion. The sudden appearance of these high-ranking colorists claiming to be Kay's teammates had caught her off guard. She had been suspicious at first, especially since Kay had returned alone in such a terrible state while the others seemed unharmed. But after observing them for a while, she realized they did not seem like bad people. That realization brought her some relief, though her concern for Kay did not lessen. She kept glancing at him, wondering when he would finally wake up. The nurse had assured her that there was nothing seriously wrong with his condition and that he would regain consciousness soon, but waiting like this still made her uneasy. After a moment, Red turned his attention to Mary and confirmed her identity as Kay's friend. With a calm and reassuring tone, he told her not to worry about Kay's condition. Then he asked her about something else. He was looking for a small creature named Nero and wanted to know if she had seen it. Hearing that, Mary suddenly remembered the little companion who had followed Kay. Before she could respond, Gale's expression changed as he noticed something unusual. His eyes widened as he spotted two small black ears peeking out from behind Kay's pillow. He immediately pointed it out, realizing that the creature they were looking for was right there. The black cat tried to stay hidden, but Gale was already furious. He recalled how much trouble the creature had caused and began complaining about it, especially how it had swallowed the star fragment and disappeared without a trace. Without thinking, he rushed forward to grab it, but Nero moved quickly, dodging his attempt and escaping his grasp. Mary reacted instantly, catching Nero in her arms before anything else could happen. Relief washed over her as she held the small creature tightly, thankful that it was safe. She had been worried about it the entire time, and seeing it unharmed was enough to calm her down. As she held Nero, something unexpected happened. The cat suddenly opened its mouth and a bright light appeared. Startled, Mary watched as a glowing object floated out of it. She stared in confusion, unable to process what she was seeing. Red stepped forward and immediately recognized the object. It was the star fragment. Taking it into his hand, he let out a quiet breath, relieved that they no longer had to figure out how to retrieve it. As he looked at the glowing piece, however, his expression turned somber. He could not help but think about everything they had sacrificed to obtain it. At the same time, Kay remained trapped in a nightmare. Surrounded by darkness, he felt an overwhelming sense of danger. The image of the sword demon returned again and again, forcing him to relive the fear. His thoughts turned to his teammates, and he became anxious, believing they would not be able to handle such an enemy without him. The urgency to act pushed against his mind. He told himself that he needed to wake up, that he could not remain there while others were in danger. Kay shot upright in bed, breathing heavily as he looked around in confusion. The hospital room came into focus, and he saw Red holding the glowing fragment while Ellie, Gale, and Mary stood nearby. He could not understand what had happened or how he ended up there. Looking down at his own hands, he froze. Something was wrong. He realized that he had become colorless. The realization hit him immediately, and panic began to rise. His thoughts raced as he wondered what this meant for him. Would the others accept him like this, or would he be cast aside? The fear of being abandoned again started to take hold. Seeing his reaction, Red spoke up calmly, telling him to lift his head. There was no anger in his voice, no disappointment. He made it clear that Kay's condition did not matter to him. What mattered was the result they had achieved together. Holding up the star fragment, Red smiled slightly and acknowledged their success. For a first mission, they had exceeded expectations. Then, with a firm tone, he told Kay to prepare himself because from now on, he would be working him hard as part of the team. Kay was caught off guard for a moment, but then the tension in his chest eased. Instead of rejection, he had been accepted. A small smile formed on his face as relief replaced his earlier fear. He responded firmly, ready to move forward. After settling the immediate matters, Red gave the group permission to relax and dismissed them, allowing the atmosphere in the room to finally lighten a little. He turned and walked toward the door, saying that he would go report the situation to Lord Luminous before leaving. Before stepping out, he reminded the new recruits to rest until they received further orders from the exploration team. The hospital room door shut behind him, leaving the three of them alone. Ellie looked at Kay, knowing he probably had many things to explain, but she chose not to push him. Instead, she asked if he remembered anything after he had been knocked unconscious. Kay immediately recalled Captain Red's warning about keeping the power of the black color a secret. Feeling uneasy, he hesitated before replying that he did not really remember much. From his expression alone, Ellie understood that he did not want to say more. He could not stop thinking about whether there was a way to get his black color back. Seeing his troubled face, Mary suddenly laughed confidently and said there was no need to worry because she had already prepared something for this situation. She began searching through her luggage, muttering to herself as she looked for it. After a brief moment, she found what she was looking for and excitedly pulled it out, revealing a bottle filled with pitch-black liquid. Ellie was immediately stunned by its appearance, while Mary calmly explained that she had secretly taken it from the waste warehouse. Looking at the thick, dark substance, Ellie could not hide her concern and questioned why Mary would bring something so dangerous back, saying it did not even look like proper ink. In contrast, Kay's reaction was completely different. He was genuinely happy to see it, recognizing it as something special that only he and Mary understood. To him, that so-called waste was actually the source of his color. Without hesitation, he picked up the bottle and was about to drink it. After finishing, he let out a relieved breath, saying he finally felt alive again. Almost instantly, a black aura formed around him, and his hair returned to its original jet-black color. Clenching his fist, he smiled with satisfaction, feeling fully recovered. Mary clapped happily, but reminded him that it still was not enough and told him to come by her room later for more. Kay thanked her with a bright smile, clearly relieved. Watching the two of them, Gale suddenly interrupted coldly, asking if they were done with their pointless talk. He turned to leave, saying he was going, but then stopped and looked back at Kay. His gaze fixed on him sharply as he pointed out that Kay's arm had already returned to normal. Gale's mind was filled with questions. He knew that such rapid recovery was something only specialized healing colorists could achieve. Staring at Kay's arm, which had been severely injured before, he could not understand how it had healed so quickly. Unable to hold back his curiosity any longer, and perhaps carrying a bit of guilt from earlier, he turned back and demanded an explanation. He asked why Kay had stepped in and taken that hit for him. Kay scratched his neck awkwardly and hesitated before answering. He explained that at that moment he felt everyone was in danger and believed his power could block the attack. He admitted that he had almost died because of it, but he had acted based on instinct. However, his explanation only made Gale more frustrated. His expression darkened as he stepped forward, grabbed Kay by the collar, and accused him of lying. He demanded to know who had asked him to interfere and expressed how much he disliked that kind of self-righteous behavior. Kay stood there completely confused by the reaction. He had not expected such anger. Seeing this, Mary could not stay silent. She immediately pointed at Gale and shouted at him, questioning why he was acting like that and calling him out for suddenly losing control. Gale let go of Kay, clearly annoyed, and turned away without saying another word. He walked out of the room, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. Mary watched him leave, irritated by his attitude and complaining about how he did not even apologize. Ellie, who had been observing quietly, told her not to take it personally and explained that Gale had always been like that. After saying that, she also prepared to leave. Kay thanked her politely, and before stepping out, she mentioned that their duel would have to be postponed until another time. After Ellie left, Kay turned to Mary and suggested they should go as well. Mary nodded, but just as they were about to leave, Kay suddenly remembered something. He stopped her and said he had something he wanted to show her first. Seeing her curiosity, he excitedly explained how he had defeated a giant mechanical monster during his reconnaissance. Reaching up to a shelf, he grabbed something and presented it with a smile, saying he had brought it back as a gift for her. It was the energy core from the machine he had fought. Mary stared at the item in his hand, surprised and clearly delighted. Holding it carefully, she thanked him, touched that he had thought of her even in such a situation. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, heavy footsteps echoed through a vast white palace. A lone figure walked steadily toward a bright light at the end of a long corridor. It was Captain Red. Moving past towering pillars, he stepped through a radiant gate and entered a grand sanctuary filled with floating silk banners of different colors. With a calm tone, he announced his return. A gentle and pure voice responded, welcoming him. A mysterious woman with long white hair appeared, smiling as she said she had been waiting for him. Red stood before her with confidence and said it had been a while since he had any good news to report. A slight smile appeared on his face as he confirmed that things had gone exactly as predicted. Looking directly at her, he stated that they could now finally open the Dark Witch's veil, addressing her respectfully as Lady Luminous. At Mary's workshop, the atmosphere quickly turned lively as she focused entirely on the metal core Kay had brought back. The more she examined it, the more amazed she became, unable to hide her excitement as she muttered in disbelief at what she was seeing. According to what she had studied before, this was unmistakably a piece of ancient civilization technology. She explained that the device used ink as a power source, which sounded simple on the surface, but its efficiency was far beyond anything modern systems could achieve. Even a small amount of faded ink could keep a golem running for a long time. To her, that level of efficiency was incredible, and she could not stop praising how advanced that lost technology must have been. Kay, however, looked at it with a doubtful expression, saying that to him it did not seem very different from a normal energy core and questioning whether it was really as special as she claimed. Mary immediately dismissed his opinion, insisting that such items were extremely rare, even for experienced exploration teams. Finding one was something that might only happen once in a long time if luck was on your side. Her eyes drifted as she imagined uncovering more hidden technologies like this, clearly captivated by the idea. Kay casually suggested that if it was that valuable, they could just sell it for a huge amount of money. The moment he said that, Mary reacted instantly, clearly irritated by the idea. To her, turning such a discovery into money was a complete waste. She firmly stated that a real technician would never give up a chance to study something like this. Instead, she declared that she would dismantle it and analyze every part of it. A confident smile returned to her face as she said she already had ideas forming in her mind. She promised that she would use what she learned from it to create a perfect set of equipment specifically for him. Seeing how happy she was, Kay quietly smiled, feeling that bringing the core back had been the right decision. He called out to her lightly and said he would leave for now, planning to return later. Just as he was about to go, Mary suddenly stopped him. Her expression turned serious as she told him that someone had been looking for him. Kay was confused by this, and Mary began explaining what had happened earlier when she had gone deep into the Shadow District to find ink for him. She recalled being stopped by a group of strangers she had never seen before. At first, she thought they were just random thugs, but that assumption quickly changed when they directly mentioned Kay. One of them, a man wearing dark glasses, had approached her and confirmed her identity as Kay's friend. He made it clear that they were looking for the person known for having the black ink color. Sensing danger immediately, Mary had run away without hesitation. Hearing this, Kay grew concerned and scolded her for going into such a dangerous area alone. At the same time, he felt relieved that she had managed to escape safely. Mary warned him seriously that if he encountered those people, he should avoid getting involved with them at all costs. Kay nodded, agreeing with her, and said goodbye before heading home. As he walked through the city, he thought about what she had said. Although he felt uneasy, he tried to convince himself that the area was generally safe and nothing serious would happen. He reasoned that if those people were truly targeting him, they would eventually come looking for him anyway. Continuing down the streets filled with lights, Kay simply wanted to return home and rest after everything that had happened. However, something caught his attention. There seemed to be far more vagrants around than usual. Even those who normally stayed hidden were now out in the open, making him wonder if something unusual was going on. Just then, Nero suddenly reacted, drawing Kay's attention toward a dark alley nearby. Confused, he asked what was wrong and followed the direction Nero was pointing at. He hesitated, knowing that going into the Shadow District was dangerous, but Nero kept urging him forward. Eventually, he gave in, trusting Nero's instincts. Believing there must be something important inside, he decided to take the risk. At the same time, he thought of testing something he had been practicing. He focused his black energy into his eyes, trying to recreate the moments when his vision had changed before and allowed him to see things others could not. He quietly activated the ability, hoping it would help him detect danger. As soon as it worked, he was surprised by what he saw. At the far end of the alley, there was a figure glowing with a bright white light. The sight completely caught him off guard. Trying to confirm what he was seeing, he called out, asking who was there. In response, a cloaked figure stepped forward from the shadows and spoke in a low voice, saying they had been waiting for him. Kay froze at those words, realizing that this person already knew who he was. The situation instantly became tense in his mind. If this was one of the people searching for him, then this might be his chance to confront them directly. Without hesitation, he prepared himself, thinking that capturing this person could give him the answers he needed and ensure Mary's safety. Kay rushed toward the mysterious doorway where the dark figure had been standing, but the moment he crossed the threshold, the space around him twisted violently. He stopped in confusion, unable to process what had just happened. The dark alley had completely vanished, replaced by a vast white space. He looked around, trying to understand what was going on, when suddenly a calm voice echoed behind him. The voice sounded amused, as if this situation had not been planned to happen so soon. Kay quickly turned around and froze when he saw a woman standing right beside him. She had long white hair and an overwhelming presence that made the entire space feel different. There was something about her that felt far beyond ordinary. She spoke calmly, saying that he should feel honored because not many people were fortunate enough to find her. Kay instinctively stepped back, still trying to process the situation, and demanded to know who she was. The woman simply smiled, her expression calm yet filled with authority, and introduced herself as Celestia. She addressed him directly as the descendant of the Black Ink. Hearing that title, Kay was momentarily confused, but what truly caught his attention was her appearance. Her entire body seemed to glow with countless colors, radiating a brilliance he had never seen before. It was the first time he had ever encountered someone so pure and radiant. A sudden thought crossed his mind. If she possessed such presence, then she could only be someone of immense importance. He began to realize that she might be the very figure known as Luminous. The fact that someone like her had personally come to find him made him uneasy. He could not understand why someone of her status would seek out someone like him. As he stared at her, something inside him reacted. A faint whisper echoed within his mind, slowly growing louder. It was filled with a strange desire, urging him to approach the light in front of him. The voice became more insistent, repeating itself over and over, pushing him toward the brilliant figure before him. Without realizing it, darkness began to spread across his body. His expression twisted as the black color started to consume him once again. His eyes filled with a dangerous intent, and his body trembled as if he was losing control. Celestia watched this calmly, though there was a hint of surprise in her eyes. She had not done anything, yet the darkness was reacting on its own. Even though she had heard about this from Red, seeing it firsthand was completely different. She quickly realized that Kay had not become a dark witch, which meant there was something unique about his connection to the black color. Instead of viewing it as a threat, she saw it as potential. While others might have chosen to eliminate him, she believed there was value in someone who could withstand such power. In her eyes, ability mattered more than rigid rules. If he could control darkness, then that power could be used. Holding her scepter, she released a strong light that cut through the black energy surrounding him. The moment the light reached him, Kay suddenly regained consciousness. He collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily as if he had just escaped something dangerous. The voice in his mind faded, but the memory of it remained clear. Celestia observed him closely and asked whether the voice he heard belonged to the Dark Witch. Kay shook his head, unable to give a definite answer, saying that it was just a strange whisper he could not fully understand. Seeing how tense he was, Celestia let out a small laugh and explained that she had only come to meet him because Red had mentioned him. She then thanked him on behalf of the city. Kay looked confused by her words, unable to recall doing anything significant. He did not even realize the importance of what he had done. Celestia pointed out that he had retrieved the star fragment, something very few people could accomplish. She explained that most people did not understand the true value of such fragments, but anyone who managed to bring one back deserved recognition. Kay hesitated, saying that it had not been his achievement alone and that it was thanks to Red and his team. However, Celestia interrupted him, saying that while the team played a role, the key factor was that he had been the one to open the Dark Witch's veil. Her gaze sharpened as she asked if he understood what that meant. Even someone like her had never been able to open it. She explained that such a barrier could only be opened by the witch herself, which made his ability something extremely unusual. She then revealed that star fragments were scattered across the Black Lands, but most of them were sealed behind that veil. The city had been fighting for a long time to retrieve them, yet they had only managed to collect a few that were accessible. Kay listened, but still did not fully understand why all of this mattered. He questioned why she was explaining these things to him when he did not even know what the fragments were used for. Realizing that words alone would not be enough, Celestia decided to show him directly. She warned him that what he was about to see was not something that should be revealed to others. With a sudden burst of light, the space around them shifted again. Kay was momentarily blinded as the environment changed. When he regained his vision, he found himself in what she described as her residence. She raised the star fragment in her hand and told him to watch carefully. As she activated it, a massive beam of light shot out, releasing an overwhelming energy that spread outward toward the horizon. Kay stood frozen, unable to look away. The sight before him was beyond anything he had imagined. The endless darkness of the Black Lands was being pushed back by that single beam of light. At that moment, he finally understood. The fragments were not just objects. They were the key to pushing back the darkness itself. The loud cries of a newspaper boy echoed through the streets, announcing urgent news that quickly spread across the city. People poured out of their homes, gathering in groups as they reacted to the shocking report. It was said that Lord Luminous had pushed back the darkness and reclaimed lost territory. The entire city was filled with excitement and disbelief. Many began talking about the pillar of light they had witnessed the previous day, realizing it had been the work of Lord Luminous. To them, it felt like a miracle. After decades of fear and struggle, humanity had finally regained land from the darkness. With new territory came hope. People believed that as the safe zones expanded, the threat of monsters would gradually decrease. Even though most had never seen this figure directly, they understood that someone had to stand between the darkness and the city, protecting the fragile light that kept them alive. This sudden victory also opened up countless new opportunities. The newly reclaimed lands promised resources, especially valuable ink, which was essential for survival and advancement. The major families wasted no time. They began organizing new pioneer teams, preparing to invest heavily and secure as many benefits as possible. The entire city entered a state of excitement and ambition, each group hopping to claim a share of what had been gained. Amid all of this chaos, Kay sat quietly in his room, thinking about everything that had happened the day before. The image of the overwhelming light still lingered in his mind, along with the words that had been spoken to him. He now understood the true meaning behind the star fragments and why they were so important to everyone. Celestia had explained that the fragment his team retrieved was not just valuable, but extraordinary. However, she had also warned him that such power would attract danger. Demons were already watching the area, and if they discovered his ability, they would hunt him relentlessly. The memory of the sword demon surfaced in his mind, reminding him that the threat was real. She had reassured him that the city would protect him, but at the same time, she admitted that their resources were limited. Most of their efforts were focused on survival, and even she could not stay by his side for long because she had to maintain the barrier against the darkness. Looking at him seriously, she had told him that he was different. His power would attract both fear and greed. There would always be people who wanted to use him for their own purposes. Even so, she encouraged him to continue walking his own path as a colorist. After that meeting, she had simply sent him away. Kay remembered being slightly stunned, realizing that she had only come to thank him and give a warning without even preparing a proper reward. Now, after resting for an entire day, he began thinking about what to do next. His thoughts turned to Mary. Her ink reserves were running low, and she was probably struggling because of it. Since he had some free time, he checked the small amount of money he had left and considered going back to mining like he used to, just to earn a bit more. As he walked through the city, he eventually stopped in front of a large, ancient white building. For a moment, he simply stood there, remembering how things used to be. Back when he had no color, this was a place he would not even dare to approach. It was where skilled colorists gathered, a place far beyond his reach at the time. But now things were different. He walked forward and entered the hall without hesitation. The moment he stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. People immediately noticed him and whispers began to spread. Some were curious, others cautious. His appearance alone was enough to draw attention. Many of them focused on the black color surrounding him. It was something they had never seen before, and it made them uneasy. Some recognized him as the person who had gained attention during the recent expedition. Others recalled rumors about his connection to Captain Red and the Pioneer team. The hall quickly filled with quiet discussions. Some people were intrigued, while others felt uncomfortable just looking at him. His existence alone seemed to disrupt their expectations of what a colorist should be. From above, a young man with bright red hair observed him with interest. He found Kay's completely black appearance unusual and even amusing. To him, it was something worth watching closely. Nearby, Arancia also looked at Kay, her expression more serious. Having witnessed his power firsthand, she could not deny that he was impressive. At the same time, something about him troubled her. The memory of him being consumed by darkness still lingered in her mind. She quietly concluded that someone like him needed to be watched carefully. Meanwhile, Kay ignored all the whispers and continued walking through the hall. He was already used to being looked at differently, so none of it bothered him anymore. Eventually, he reached the reception desk. The receptionist greeted him politely and asked if it was his first time there. Kay confirmed it and asked if there were any jobs suitable for him, saying he wanted to try working. The receptionist handed him a form and mentioned that he had not yet received his official emblem. She instructed him to fill in his details before proceeding further. Standing there, Kay looked at the form, quietly preparing to take his next step forward. The receptionist calmly explained that new colorists usually started with low-risk missions, such as mining for ink or dealing with weaker monsters. As she spoke, Kay could already feel the atmosphere around him shifting. The people nearby had begun whispering, their voices carrying clear hostility. Some looked at him with disgust, questioning the nature of his color. Others doubted whether someone like him could even be considered human. A few went further, openly comparing him to a monster, unable to understand why anyone would be interested in him at all. Among them, a red-haired man sat watching silently, unable to hide the irritation building on his face. His gaze was fixed on Kay's back, filled with resentment. Ever since Kay had been selected for the recent exploration mission, the man had felt nothing but frustration. To him, Kay was nothing more than a lucky rookie who had somehow gained the attention of powerful figures. The idea that someone inexperienced could stand there so confidently only fueled his anger. Unable to hold back, he stood up and called out to those around him. His words quickly stirred others who had been indifferent before. What began as whispers soon turned into agreement, and several people followed him as he moved to confront Kay. At that moment, Kay was already elsewhere, working quietly inside a dark mine. Completely focused on his task, he continued digging and collecting resources. When he discovered glowing ore embedded within the stone, his expression brightened. Carefully extracting it, he held the raw ink material in his hands, unable to hide his satisfaction. For the first time, he felt a sense of accomplishment from earning something on his own. Mining had always been difficult, especially with the recent decline in output, yet he had managed to gather more than expected. He began calculating its value, thinking about how useful it could be, whether as fuel or as a weapon. The thought of Mary's reaction made him smile. Activating his special vision, he looked deeper into the darkness around him. The world changed instantly, revealing hidden traces of minerals that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. With this ability, the mind no longer felt like a blind search. It became something closer to a guided process, almost like scanning for resources. Even so, he knew the limitation. The ability consumed too much energy, making it impossible to maintain for long. After collecting enough, he glanced at Nero and casually mentioned that there was no need for help. The cat simply responded with a quiet sound, watching him continue his work. Looking at the amount he had gathered, Kay realized he had finished faster than expected. Returning too early with such a large haul would only draw unnecessary attention. Thinking about it, he decided to stay a little longer and use the time to test his abilities. Holding a crystal in his hand, he began analyzing his own power. His absorption skill required direct contact, and at times it activated without his intention. If he wanted to rely on it in the future, he needed to gain proper control over it. As he examined a particularly high-quality stone, he noticed how vibrant its color was. But the moment he touched it, the black energy surged from his hand uncontrollably. Before he could react, the crystal lost all its color, turning pale and worthless. Frustration quickly followed. That single mistake had cost him something valuable, yet it also revealed an important detail. The stronger and more vivid the color, the harder it was to control. The strange voice he sometimes heard seemed to intensify that instability. This time, instead of reacting impulsively, he forced himself to stay calm. He began thinking more carefully about how his power worked. If black was a mixture of all colors, then in theory, he should be able to use those individual properties as well. Trying to imitate what he had seen before, he focused on recreating a specific type of energy. He recalled the sensation of red energy, the heat and intensity it carried. Slowly, that warmth began to form in his hand. For a brief moment, a faint red flame appeared before disappearing just as quickly. Even though the result was incomplete, he didn't feel discouraged. Improvement would take time. Determined, he continued practicing alone in the mine, repeating the process again and again until night fell. By the time he finished, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Carrying the bags of ore, he made his way back, lost in thought about his progress and the mistakes he still needed to fix. As he walked through the quiet path, a voice suddenly echoed ahead. The mocking tone immediately caught his attention. Kay stopped when he saw several figures blocking his way. Among them stood the red-haired man from earlier, his expression filled with hostility. The group surrounding him carried the same intent, their presence making it clear that this was no coincidence. For a moment, Kay simply stood there, confused by the situation. He didn't understand why these strangers had come looking for him, but the tension in the air made one thing obvious. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be peaceful. One of them stepped forward, a man named Crab, his expression filled with impatience as he approached. He made it clear they had been waiting and assumed Kay had been hiding somewhere to avoid them. Kay remained calm, showing no reaction even as the man continued speaking in a rude and aggressive tone. The demand soon followed, telling him to hand over the bag he was carrying. The glint of the ore had already caught their attention, and they recognized it as valuable color material. Another accomplice, Gray, couldn't hide his excitement and chimed in eagerly, while their leader, Manch, stood behind them, watching with amusement. His gaze gradually turned darker as he observed Kay. To him, it was absurd that a rookie had managed to gather such valuable resources. He accused Kay of being greedy for keeping everything to himself, and suggested that if he cooperated and revealed where he found the ore, things might end easily for him. Otherwise, they made it clear they wouldn't care if he ended up dead. Kay said nothing. Without showing any resistance, he slowly placed the bag on the ground. Seeing this, Crab immediately laughed, convinced that Kay had given in out of fear. But before he could even finish his mockery, everything changed in an instant. A powerful punch slammed straight into his face, sending him crashing backward onto the ground. The sudden shift stunned the others. They couldn't understand what had just happened. Kay calmly cracked his knuckles, his expression unchanged as he spoke in a cold and straightforward manner. People like them were nothing new to him. He had no interest in wasting time and simply told them to come at him together because he needed to finish quickly. One of them rushed forward with a knife, attempting to strike, but Kay easily sidestepped the attack. In the same motion, he countered with force, sending the attacker flying into the cliffside. The impact shattered the rock behind him, leaving him completely incapacitated. The last subordinate tried to take advantage of the situation and attacked from behind, but Kay reacted instantly. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it sharply, and swept his leg out from under him. The man collapsed violently, his head striking the stone floor with a heavy sound. Kay looked at them coldly, thinking that greed always came with a price. He was about to step forward and deal with the last one when suddenly a sharp sound cut through the air. A bullet tore toward him at high speed. His body moved instinctively, narrowly dodging the attack. The projectile passed by him and slammed into the cliff, leaving a deep hole behind. Had he been even slightly slower, it would have been fatal. At a distance, Manch stood with a gun in his hand, smoke still rising from its barrel. A faint smirk appeared on his face as he commented on Kay's reaction. He had expected the fight to end with a single shot, but now his interest had grown. He revealed that he had heard about Kay before, the one with the black color, and expressed clear disgust toward it. Without hesitation, he began firing repeatedly. Each shot echoed through the area as Kay moved swiftly, using precise footwork to dodge while closing the distance. However, every time he attempted to get close, Manch shot at the ground instead, causing crystal formations to rise and block his path. Confident in his ability, Manch explained that his power allowed him to crystallize his own blood, creating materials like rubies and bloodstones. Combined with his weapon, it gave him effectively endless ammunition. In his eyes, there was no way someone with such a worthless black color could compete. Kay retreated behind a rock, taking a brief moment to steady himself. Dark energy slowly began to spread across his body, enveloping him. He recalled how reckless he had been before and understood that continuing to defend passively would only drain him further. Just then, something unexpected happened. One of the men he had already defeated suddenly rushed forward and grabbed him tightly from behind, shouting for his leader to take the shot. Manch didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger immediately. The bullet shot forward and pierced straight through Kay's head. For a moment, everything went silent. But instead of collapsing, Kay remained standing. The only change was the dark energy swirling around the point of impact, absorbing the force completely. Manch's expression froze in disbelief. He couldn't understand how the shot had failed despite hitting directly. Kay slowly brushed away the lingering dark mist from his body. His eyes were now sharp and filled with cold intent. The situation had completely shifted. He stated calmly that the shooting was over. Now it was his turn. The red-haired leader froze in place, unable to process what he was seeing. Even after taking a direct hit to the head, Kay stood there completely unharmed. His voice rose in disbelief as he tried to make sense of it, insisting that something like that should have been impossible. He quickly tried to reassure himself, convincing his own mind that Kay was simply pretending. In his eyes, there was no way someone could take an armor-piercing bullet head-on and walk away without damage. He assumed Kay was just putting on an act, hiding internal injuries and trying to intimidate him. Kay, however, paid no attention to his words. He had already realized that nothing had truly changed. As long as the other man still had his weapon, the situation would remain dangerous. Even if the bullets could no longer harm him directly, he would still be forced into a defensive position. That was not something he wanted. Calmly, he began analyzing his current abilities. The dark power he used consumed an enormous amount of color energy, far more than he could naturally replenish. If he used it recklessly, he would exhaust himself almost immediately. That meant he needed to finish this quickly. The priority was clear: close the distance and eliminate the threat before his energy ran out. With that in mind, Kay raised his hand toward his opponent. His voice remained steady as he spoke, suggesting he would try something new and borrow a bit of what he had just seen. The red-haired man stared at him, confused and unable to understand what he meant. Before he could react, the dark energy in Kay's palm began to shift. It condensed rapidly, compressing into a sharp and solid form. The process looked unstable, almost like a broken copy of something that still somehow functioned perfectly. Within seconds, a pitch-black spear formed in his hand, radiating a cold and terrifying aura. The leader's expression changed instantly, fear replacing his earlier confidence. K, on the other hand, was visibly excited. This was something he had never managed before. Until now, his use of power had been crude and unrefined, relying only on brute force. But this was different. This meant he could shape his energy with intent. He realized that by observing his opponent's crystallization ability, he had unconsciously learned how to better control his own color. The realization made him smile slightly. He thanked his opponent mockingly, saying he had learned something useful from him. Without hesitation, Kay swung the spear forward. It shot through the air at incredible speed, forcing the red-haired man into panic. Desperately, he began firing his weapon again, trying to stop the attack. But Kay moved smoothly, using the spear to deflect every incoming shot as he advanced. The distance between them disappeared almost instantly. Kay spoke calmly, pointing out how useless the resistance was. Since they were already fighting, he suggested using the man as practice. His tone carried no anger, only a cold focus. In the next moment, Kay leapt into the air. His body moved effortlessly as he brought the spear down with immense force. The impact shook the ground, sending shockwaves outward and forcing the red-haired man back in terror. The man could barely comprehend what was happening. It felt as though he was facing his own power reflected back at him. The realization struck him hard. Kay was copying his moves. Kay didn't deny it. Instead, he seemed even more interested, wondering how far he could take this ability. He adjusted the form of the dark energy again, reshaping it into something new. The spear dissolved and transformed into a massive black blade. Without hesitation, he swung it down in a decisive strike. The attack shattered the red-haired man's weapon instantly, breaking it apart as if it were nothing more than fragile scrap. The man stared at the remains in disbelief. His custom gun, something he had relied on completely, was gone in a single attack. The shock was overwhelming. His confidence collapsed along with the weapon. As Kay approached him step by step, the fear finally took over. The man could no longer maintain his composure. To him, Kay no longer looked human. He looked like something else entirely. Kay, however, was beginning to feel the strain. He let out a slow breath, noticing how quickly his energy was being drained. The ability was powerful, far more than anything he had used before, but it came at a heavy cost. Even so, he couldn't hide the satisfaction on his face. Despite the exhaustion, he understood one thing clearly. This power, even in its current state, was already more than enough. Looking down at his now disarmed opponent, Kay let out a faint sneer. The situation had completely turned, and he pointed out coldly that without a weapon, there was nothing left for the man to rely on. Even if he tried to fight barehanded, it would make no difference. Those words struck directly at the man's pride. His expression twisted as anger took over. In the next instant, a violent surge of red energy erupted from his body. His aura flared intensely, and the ground beneath them trembled as multiple crystal pillars burst upward in dazzling flashes. He roared that Kay had misunderstood him. The gun had never been his only strength. His ability allowed him to create not just bullets, but solid crystal structures like rubies and red iron ore. Even without a weapon, he believed he was more than capable of crushing a rookie. With that, he charged forward like a wild beast, his entire presence radiating killing intent. The energy around him intensified as if he had pushed himself to the limit. From all directions, sharp crystal shards formed and launched toward Kay in a relentless storm. The attack forced Kay to move back continuously. Each fragment struck with explosive force, creating bursts of light and shockwaves around him. The pressure was intense, leaving no room for error. But in that dangerous moment, Kay remained focused. Dark energy gathered around his arm, condensing into a dense, pitch-black shield. The shadowy barrier took shape instantly, covering him just as the crystal storm closed in. The impact followed. The black shield held firm, completely blocking the barrage. Not only that, the dark energy pushed outward, crushing the incoming crystals as if they were fragile glass. The storm of red energy broke apart under the pressure, unable to penetrate the defense. Without hesitation, Kay moved forward. He pushed through the collapsing attacks and surged ahead at high speed, closing the distance in an instant. The red-haired man's eyes widened as he watched his own attack fail completely. Before he could react, Kay was already in front of him. In the blink of an eye, a heavy punch drove straight into his stomach. The impact forced the air out of his lungs as pain surged through his body. He barely had time to react before Kay grabbed him by the collar, lifted him up, and slammed him hard into the ground. The fight ended just like that. Kay pinned him down, holding him firmly in place as he spoke in a cold, steady tone. This outcome was something he had brought upon himself, so there was no one else to blame. The man lay there trembling, completely overwhelmed. The strength he had just faced made no sense to him. In his eyes, a rookie should never possess such power. Fear mixed with frustration, and he began shouting, calling Kay a monster. To him, the black color was something unnatural, something that didn't belong among humans. He claimed that everything about Kay felt wrong, that his existence itself defied logic. Even as he spoke, his voice became more desperate. He mocked Kay, questioning whether he had ever felt strange living with such accursed power. In his eyes, Kay was nothing more than a monster hiding behind a human face. Kay didn't respond immediately. His expression remained calm, but his eyes grew sharper, filled with a quiet pressure that made the man's voice falter. He tightened his grip on the man's collar, the tension alone enough to make him sweat in fear. Kay's gaze locked onto him like a predator observing prey that had already lost the will to fight. Then, unexpectedly, Kay let out a low laugh. The situation had become almost ridiculous. The same person who had attacked him moments ago was now reduced to throwing empty words. He calmly stated that he understood exactly what the man was thinking. Without warning, his hand shifted from the collar to the man's neck, gripping it firmly. His voice remained steady as he spoke, saying that if the man was so curious about his power, then he would show him everything. Panic immediately filled the man's face. He couldn't understand what was about to happen, but instinct told him it wouldn't end well. Kay's tone turned colder as he pointed out the fairness of the situation. If someone desired what belonged to him, then he also had the right to take something in return. The man struggled, desperately telling him to stop, but it was already too late. From Kay's hand, the dark energy surged outward violently, expanding with overwhelming force. When it was over, Kay sat calmly on the pile of unconscious bodies, the tension gone but replaced with a new problem. He looked around and started thinking about what to do next. Running away crossed his mind immediately, but he knew leaving things like this could create even bigger trouble later. He understood how people saw his power. Even if some were curious, most feared the black color. If anyone found out what had happened here, especially how he had drained them, it wouldn't end well. They wouldn't see him as a normal colorist anymore. Rejecting the idea of simply leaving, he quickly searched through his bag, trying to come up with a solution. After a moment, his expression changed when he found something useful, a bottle of special ink. Without wasting time, he forced open the leader's mouth and poured the liquid inside. The process wasn't gentle, but it worked. Slowly, the man's color began to return, his condition stabilizing little by little. Seeing that result, Kay repeated the process with the others, making sure they all regained at least some of their lost color. The scene ended up looking chaotic, like a rushed treatment in the middle of nowhere. Once he was done, he didn't stay any longer and quickly left the area. Later, near the eastern gate, guards discovered two of the thugs tied up and left behind. Their color looked faded, and the sight immediately caused concern. People nearby began speculating, assuming they had simply exhausted themselves in the dark zone. By that time, Kay had already slipped away unnoticed, his presence completely gone from the scene. He let out a quiet breath, relieved that no one had caught him. Giving them the ink had helped restore enough of their color to avoid suspicion. He reassured himself that even if something did go wrong, Captain Red would likely step in. For now, everything had been handled cleanly. Without wasting more time, Kay headed straight to the workshop. As soon as he arrived, he called out loudly for Mary. She turned around, clearly annoyed, questioning where he had been for so long. Kay scratched his head and laughed awkwardly, explaining that he had taken a mission at the assembly hall. His expression quickly shifted to excitement, which caught Mary's attention. She grew curious, asking if he had something good to show. Without hesitation, Kay presented several containers filled with bright raw color ore. The moment Mary saw them, her reaction changed completely. She was stunned by both the quality and the amount. Kay explained that he had gathered everything during the mission and brought it back specifically for her. Hearing that, Mary couldn't hide her happiness. She hugged him tightly, praising him with genuine excitement and immediately talking about how she would use the materials. As she held him, Kay suddenly noticed something. A faint glow surrounded her, a warm light that felt strangely familiar. It reminded him of the energy he had seen before, but this time it was even brighter. He quietly observed her, realizing how different her presence felt. Despite everything she had been through, she still carried a warmth that stood out in a harsh world. It felt natural, almost comforting, like a small source of light in a place filled with darkness. Breaking the moment, Mary excitedly called him over. She mentioned she had been preparing something for him and decided to show it now. Curious, Kay followed as she revealed her latest project. She proudly explained that she had been working on a special weapon just for him. Kay was genuinely surprised, not expecting something like that. Mary continued talking enthusiastically, explaining how much progress she had made. With the new ore he brought, she could upgrade everything much more easily. Her eyes shone with excitement, completely focused on her craft. Just as the atmosphere turned light again, a cold voice interrupted from behind. Kay froze slightly and turned around to see Ellie and Gale standing there. The sudden appearance caught him off guard, especially with Gale present. Ellie calmly explained that Lord Luminous had acknowledged their recent mission and requested their presence at the command center to receive a reward. Hearing that name, Kay was momentarily surprised. Before he could say anything, Mary quickly urged him to go, saying it was an important opportunity. Even though he wanted to stay and see more of her work, he understood he couldn't ignore the summons. With a small smile, he promised to come back soon. Together with Ellie and Gale, the three new recruits left the workshop and headed toward the Dawnbreaker Pioneer Team headquarters. Following the staff members' guidance, the trio moved through a long and quiet corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. The deeper they went, the heavier the atmosphere became, as if they were approaching someone of immense authority. At the end of the path, Kay stepped into the Dawnbreaker Pioneer Team headquarters and was immediately overwhelmed by the scale of the place. The walls were lined with records of past expeditions, each display showcasing achievements that spoke of power, danger, and survival. Just standing there made him feel small, like someone who had only just stepped into a much larger world. After a short wait, they were led into the main office. Inside, a woman with striking pink hair greeted them with a calm smile. She spoke as if she already knew who they were, referring to the recent rumors that had spread throughout the city. She introduced herself as Chamalia, the captain of the Dawnbreaker Pioneer Team. The revelation caught Kay off guard. He hadn't expected someone so young to hold such a high position. The feeling was strange, like stepping into deep waters for the first time and immediately realizing how far out he was. Chamalia was no ordinary figure. She was known as one of the few individuals capable of using multiple colors, a rare and powerful ability that placed her among the city's most influential people. Normally, someone like her would only be seen in reports or heard about in passing. She spoke casually, mentioning how surprised she had been when Captain Red personally praised the new recruits, especially Kay. The existence of someone with the black color had already stirred attention among the higher ranks, and it was clear that his name had reached places he hadn't expected. The atmosphere carried a sense of seriousness until it was abruptly broken. Chamalia casually took a sip of tea, only to react immediately as the bitterness hit her. Her expression twisted as she complained about it, calling out to her assistant and asking why something sweet hadn't been prepared instead. Lavian, standing nearby, could only sigh and remind her to maintain her composure in front of the newcomers. The moment was brief, but enough to completely shatter the imposing image she had built just seconds earlier. After the unexpected interruption, Chamalia quickly returned to the main topic. The reason they had been called here was to receive the rewards for their recent mission. Lavian stepped forward and handed each of them a personal security card. These cards were exclusive to Pioneer members and contained their monthly salary along with the mission bonus. When Kay checked his card, he froze. The amount displayed was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The realization hit him immediately. With that kind of money, even something as distant as owning a house suddenly felt within reach. But that wasn't all. The trio was officially granted C-rank Pioneer status, skipping the usual probation period entirely. It was a rare privilege, one that most would never receive so quickly. Along with it came special benefits across the city, including access to the color mixing workshop for custom equipment. Ellie and Gail were visibly shocked. That workshop was a place even nobles had difficulty accessing. It was responsible for creating and maintaining the highest-level gear for colorists, and gaining entry to it was a significant advantage. Chamalia confirmed everything with a calm tone, explaining that the workshop in the Lumina district handled all advanced equipment production. For the trio, this meant opportunities that most could only dream of. With a slight smile, she formally welcomed them into the pioneer team. At the same time, her expression grew more serious as she spoke about the city's situation. After leaving the headquarters, Kay walked with a noticeably lighter mood. The excitement was hard to hide. Everything that had happened felt unreal, as if he had suddenly been pushed forward far beyond where he thought he belonged. He quietly spoke to Nero, mentioning how the day had turned out far better than expected. Being promoted to C rank so quickly still didn't feel real. Thinking about the rewards, the recognition, and the support he had received, he felt certain that joining the pioneer team had been the right decision. More than anything, he wanted to share the news with Mary. He could already imagine her reaction. But as he approached the workshop, something felt off. The door was wide open. Kay slowed down, a sense of unease creeping in. He stepped inside and called out her name, but there was no response. What he saw next made him stop completely. The workshop was in ruins. Tools and machines were scattered across the floor, and a heavy darkness filled the space. The warmth that once existed there had vanished completely. At the eastern forward base of the shining city, the night was filled with chaos. The sky echoed with the screams of monsters as waves of creatures surged forward without pause. A commander shouted orders in panic, calling for reinforcements as the abyss continued to pour out enemies. On the battlefield, the clash of weapons rang constantly. Soldiers fought desperately, trying to hold their ground while shouting instructions to focus on the larger threats first. But no matter how hard they fought, the pressure kept increasing. The endless assault slowly wore down their will, and exhaustion began to take over. From a high cliff overlooking the battlefield, a green-haired girl watched everything unfold. A faint, sinister smile appeared on her face as she observed the struggle below. To her, the scene was nothing more than entertainment. She mocked the weakness of humans, finding their resistance unimpressive. Even so, she admitted that this was only the beginning. The current attack was far from enough to achieve her goal. If she wanted to completely destroy the city, she needed a more reliable method. A calculating look appeared in her eyes as she considered her options. It seemed she might have to step in personally once again. Beside her, the white-haired sword demon spoke in a cold tone, questioning her decision. Entering the city directly would be reckless, almost suicidal. Beneath the Bingy fortress, there was a hidden passage leading down into the abyss. The green-haired girl's smile widened. She had already discovered something useful there before. Mentioning it casually, she brought up the existence of an underground city, hinting that it might be the key to her next move. Meanwhile, far from the battlefield, Kay had just returned to the workshop. The moment he stepped inside, everything felt wrong. The place was in ruins. Equipment was broken, tools scattered across the floor, and the familiar warmth of the space had completely disappeared. A sense of dread immediately settled in his chest. He rushed forward, calling out for Mary, his voice echoing through the empty room. There was no answer. Moving quickly, he searched every corner, but there was no sign of her. The scattered belongings only made the situation worse. It was clear something had happened. A dark thought crossed his mind. She might have been taken. His fists tightened as anger surged through him. He couldn't understand who would do something like this, but the possibility alone was enough to make his expression darken. Memories of Mary's smile flashed in his mind, followed by the thought of her being in danger. The fear grew stronger with each passing second. Then suddenly, a soft sound broke the silence. A familiar meow echoed through the room, snapping him out of his thoughts. Kay turned and saw Nero peeking out from a crack in the floor. The small black cat quickly jumped onto a nearby table, clearly trying to draw his attention to something. Following the signal, Kay stepped closer and noticed a device lying among the scattered tools. He immediately recognized it as something Mary had been working on. Nero continued to gesture toward it, his behavior unusually serious. That alone was enough to make Kay understand that this was important. Without hesitation, Kay activated his ability. A faint white light spread across the room as he used his inverted vision to examine the surroundings. Traces of energy became visible, lingering in the air. Among them, he identified a familiar aura. It was the same presence that always surrounded Mary. In that moment, everything became clear. She had been here, and whatever happened had occurred not long ago. Kay took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down despite the panic rising inside him. Letting emotions take over now would only make things worse. He quickly connected the situation to the group that had been targeting him before. If they were behind this, then Mary had likely been taken as bait. His expression hardened as anger replaced hesitation. He stared into the empty space, his voice low and filled with resolve. Whoever did this had made a mistake. There was no doubt in his mind now. He was going to find them. His gaze shifted to the item Mary had been working on. Without hesitation, he picked up the mechanical gauntlet and put it on. The device adjusted perfectly to his arm, as if it had been made specifically for him. The moment it locked into place, his decision was final. This was no longer just a fight. It was a rescue, and he wasn't going to hold back. Dark energy began to gather around his arm, forming streams of pitch-black power that moved like living shadows. He understood right away that even in a prolonged fight, this new power would hold. Without wasting time, he turned to Nero and gave a simple signal. It was time to move. His goal was clear. Mary. Kay stepped into the narrow alleys of the slums, moving through the damp, moss-covered walls and rusted pipes without hesitation. The streets were quiet, filled with vagrants lying motionless on the ground. Their hollow gazes followed him, but he ignored everything around him. None of it mattered right now. At a crossroads, he suddenly stopped. Something felt off. The trail he had been following had completely disappeared. His eyes lowered toward the ground, where a manhole sat slightly ajar. Beneath it, a ladder led down into darkness. That was the only path left. Descending without hesitation, Kay entered the underground passage. The space below was crowded, filled with vagrants gathering in unnatural numbers. It explained why so many had been disappearing from the surface recently. Before he could move further, a large figure stepped forward, blocking his path. A mocking laugh echoed through the tunnel as the man recognized him immediately. Kay didn't react, his gaze remained steady. He asked only one question, "Where is Mary?" The man's expression twisted with anger. He refused to answer, instead venting his hatred. He blamed Kay for his downfall, for being forced into this miserable position, reduced to working under others just to survive. The resentment had clearly been building for a long time. But Kay didn't care about any of that. The man gave the order to attack. The group rushed forward, weapons drawn, but Kay didn't even flinch. Dark energy gathered in his palm, forming a sharp black blade that flickered with unstable power. In the next instant, he moved. His speed was overwhelming. To anyone watching, he was nothing more than a blur. The blade cut through the air, and one by one, the attackers fell before they could even react. The formation collapsed immediately. Panic spread through the group. The leader, now desperate, activated his own ability and unleashed a bright blue slash aimed directly at Kay. Kay didn't dodge. He raised his hand and stopped it head-on. The attack shattered against his defense. Before the man could process what had just happened, Kay closed the distance and struck him with a single, overwhelming punch. The impact sent him flying, crashing into the ground with a scream. Kay walked forward calmly and grabbed him by the collar, lifting him up with ease. He spoke without emotion. "This isn't like last time." Looking at the defeated group around him, he made it clear that he wasn't holding back anymore. People who harmed others wouldn't receive mercy from him. Whatever happened to them now was something they had brought upon themselves. The leader trembled, unable to respond. Kay stared at him for a moment before speaking again, recalling something from the past. The man had once been a pioneer, someone who was supposed to protect others. Now he had fallen to this level. There was nothing left to respect. Without another word, Kay dragged him toward the edge of a deep pit nearby. The man tried to resist, but it was useless. Kay needed answers, and this man was going to guide him. The two of them fell into the darkness together. The descent was fast, the surrounding space swallowed by shadows. Only a faint light could be seen far below, growing larger as they dropped deeper. Kay looked down into the abyss. He hadn't expected to return here again. Then, as they neared the bottom, the darkness gave way to a massive underground city. It stretched endlessly, illuminated by scattered lights, surrounded by towering pillars and an intricate network of pipes. Beneath the ground, Kay and his guide looked small against the enormous underground space. The vast city stretched endlessly around them as they moved toward its center. Kay pushed the man forward by the shoulder and told him to move faster, his voice low and firm. He warned him not to try anything foolish. The guide clenched his teeth, clearly struggling to endure the pressure. He muttered that Kay had no idea what he was getting into, saying that no one who crossed their boss's group ever survived. He mocked him for coming alone, claiming it would be his grave. Before he could continue, Kay grabbed him by the throat, cutting him off instantly. The man choked, his face twisting in pain. Kay's eyes glowed faintly as he told him to stop talking and focus on leading the way properly. If anything happened to Mary, even the smallest thing, none of them would walk away from it. The tone was calm, but far more terrifying than any shout. The guide immediately gave in, his voice trembling as he said he understood. As they walked deeper into the underground city, people began to notice them. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some wondered if it was an internal conflict, others commented on Kay's unusual color. A few warned each other to stay away. Kay glanced around, taking in the surroundings. Nothing had changed. The place was exactly as he remembered. The underground city existed like a shadow beneath the surface, hidden from the light of lumens. It had long become a refuge for criminals and outcasts. There were no rules here. Those without color survived by relying on the mines, as it was the only option left to them. As he walked, a memory surfaced. This was the place where he had first met Mary. Meanwhile, the guide lowered his head slightly, hiding a sinister expression. He thought to himself that Kay had walked straight into their trap. His only job had been to bring him here, and now that was done. They stopped in front of an old, worn building. A deep voice echoed from within. The group stepped out from the shadows, their leader standing at the front. He said he had been waiting for a long time. The surrounding crowd began reacting immediately, mocking Kay's appearance. Some laughed at how dark his color was, comparing it to ore or ink. The atmosphere quickly turned hostile. The guide rushed forward and reported that he had brought the target as ordered. The boss glanced at him and noticed his faded, colorless state. Without hesitation, he criticized him for losing his color again, saying that those without color had no value. The man tried to explain, but the boss cut him off. His voice was cold as he declared that his usefulness had ended. Without another word, he struck him down. There was no hesitation, no mercy. Kay watched silently. Nothing had changed. He looked at the boss and said calmly that he was here now, so there was no need to waste time. He asked directly where Mary was. The boss laughed, clearly amused. He told Kay to think carefully about the situation, reminding him who had the advantage. He claimed that if Kay had cooperated earlier, everything would have been simple. Instead, he warned that the more Kay resisted, the harder it would be for him to find her. He even added that by now, who knew what might have already happened. The moment those words were spoken, the atmosphere shifted. A killing intent spread from Kay. He didn't argue, he didn't shout. He simply said that in that case, he would destroy everything here. A white glow flashed in his eyes. Dark energy surged from his arm, expanding outward like a vortex. The black power spread across his body, growing more intense with every second. The leader's expression changed instantly as he felt the pressure. He couldn't understand what he was looking at. Then it happened. A massive explosion shook the entire underground space. The shockwave sent nearby men flying, crashing into the surrounding structures. The disturbance was so loud it reached deeper into the base. Inside an office, a subordinate rushed in to report the situation, saying that the black-colored target had gone out of control. He urged his superior to act immediately. The branch leader, visibly shaken, shouted orders in panic. "Stop him. Hold him back. No matter what." The branch leader immediately ordered his men to hold the line, telling them to buy time until the higher-ups arrived. But against K, their resistance meant nothing. One after another, they were thrown aside like they weighed nothing, their attacks failing to even slow him down. The commander could only watch in disbelief, unable to understand what he was seeing. His voice trembled as he realized the gap between them. Before anyone could react further, a deep and heavy voice echoed across the area. A large figure stepped forward, his body covered in intricate tattoos. The moment he appeared, the long-haired man let out a relieved shout. The branch manager had arrived. He walked slowly, his gaze sweeping across the battlefield, clearly disappointed by what he saw. His subordinates had been completely overwhelmed by a single person. Kay stood in the center, surrounded by fallen enemies. He looked around at the ruined scene and remarked that the reputation of the group ruling the underground had become meaningless. Hearing that, the branch manager's expression hardened. He silently evaluated Kay, immediately recognizing that this was not an ordinary opponent. A subordinate nearby tried to regain confidence, claiming that their boss had once been an A-rank fighter and that Kay stood no chance against someone like him. But the moment the branch manager moved, the atmosphere shifted again. He stepped forward and charged like a storm. Kay reacted instantly, pushing off the ground with equal force. The two collided mid-air, their clash creating a violent shockwave that cracked the ground beneath them. Kay's punch was powerful, but it was blocked. The branch manager smirked, acknowledging his strength. Then, without hesitation, he counterattacked. His massive arm came down with overwhelming force, leaving Kay no room to dodge. The impact sent him flying, crashing through the surrounding stone. Kay forced himself up from the rubble, steadying his breathing as his arm trembled from the impact. The branch manager didn't give him time to recover. He moved in again, aiming to finish the fight. But this time, Kay avoided the attack and closed the distance in an instant. He placed his gauntleted hand directly against his opponent's chest. Dark energy surged forward. The branch manager froze as he felt something unfamiliar. A cold sensation spread through his body, followed by a sudden realization. His strength was being drained. The energy was being taken from him directly. He gritted his teeth, trying to resist, but the pain only intensified. His voice broke as he shouted, unable to understand what was happening. Even so, he forced himself to regain control. He stepped back, glaring at Kay with anger, calling his power unnatural. Then he stopped holding back. The ground trembled as he released his suppressed power. His body expanded, transforming into a massive figure covered in jagged rock armor. The pressure around him increased instantly. Kay remained still, watching the transformation carefully. He could feel the difference. This wasn't something he could break through easily. He realized his current approach wasn't enough. His grip tightened around the gauntlet. Dark energy erupted once again, spreading across his body in violent waves. The intensity of it made even the branch manager hesitate for a moment. For the first time, he felt something close to fear. Then it happened. The darkness around Kay began to take shape. Weapons formed from it, countless black blades, spears, and sharp constructs emerging from the void. They surrounded him, filling the space like an endless field of weapons. The battle in the underground city intensified, violent clashes echoing through the vast space and shaking everything around them. Kay, his eyes glowing white, moved forward without hesitation, forcing the branch manager to grit his teeth in frustration. The man could barely keep up as countless black weapons rose from the ground, forming an overwhelming field around Kay. The sight alone was enough to make him realize something was terribly wrong. He couldn't understand what kind of ability this was. Kay didn't give him time to think. He swung his black sword and closed the distance instantly. The blade cut through the air and struck directly against the rock armor. The impact shattered fragments of it, sending pieces flying. Before the branch manager could recover, another attack followed. Kay moved fluidly, dodging the heavy punches and stepping in again. His strikes came one after another, targeting the same point with precise intent. It didn't take long for the branch manager to understand. Kay was aiming for his head. The attacks didn't slow down. Each strike came faster than the last, leaving no room to counter. Even when he tried to retaliate, Kay avoided everything and continued pressing forward. The rock armor that once seemed impenetrable began to break apart. Large chunks were torn away with every blow. The branch manager felt it clearly. His defense was failing. Worse than that, something else was happening. The black weapons weren't just cutting through his armor. They were draining him. Each contact pulled away his color and energy, weakening him little by little. Panic started to set in. Still, he forced himself to push forward. His pride wouldn't allow him to fall here. With a roar, he gathered all his remaining strength and formed a massive spike of rock from his arm. He charged forward and swung with everything he had. The ground trembled under the impact. The force of the attack flattened nearby structures and carved a deep crater into the ground. For a brief moment, everything went still. Then the dust began to clear. Kay was still standing. The branch manager stared in disbelief. His strongest attack had been stopped. Not only that, the rock armor on his arm began to crack and collapse. He could feel it clearly now. His energy was being pulled away. The black vortex surrounding Kay was absorbing everything. The realization came too late. Before he could react, his body began to weaken rapidly. His strength faded faster than he could comprehend. He tried to gather what little energy he had left for one final move. But suddenly he froze. His vision disappeared. He raised his hands in panic, unable to understand what had just happened. He couldn't see anything. Kay didn't hesitate. Taking advantage of the opening, he moved forward and delivered a direct, powerful punch to his face. The impact sent the massive figure crashing to the ground. The branch manager could no longer fight back. He lay there struggling to breathe, his strength completely drained. The reality of the situation settled in. He was losing. He couldn't understand how someone like Kay could possess such power. In his final moments of resistance, he cursed at him, calling his ability unnatural. Kay didn't react. He simply looked down at him and asked calmly what difference it made. Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and crushed him underfoot. The fight was already over. Kay spoke again, his voice steady. "Now that you can't resist, there's nothing stopping me anymore." Kay grabbed the branch manager by the neck and tightened his grip without hesitation. Dark energy surged from his hand, draining the last of the man's remaining color. The manager screamed in agony as his strength was stripped away completely. Nearby, the subordinate with glasses could only stand frozen, his body trembling as he watched the scene unfold. He realized instantly that their leader had been defeated. Fear filled his eyes as he looked at Kay and called him a monster. Kay didn't respond. He stood silently amidst the rubble, his eyes still glowing faintly. The branch manager lay on the ground, completely faded, motionless like an empty shell. The space fell into silence. Kay turned and began to walk away. The remaining survivors didn't dare move. Even breathing felt dangerous in his presence. Before leaving, he glanced back once. His face remained calm, but the killing intent behind it made everyone freeze in place. Then he disappeared deeper into the underground. In another dark area, Mary slowly regained consciousness. A dull pain throbbed in her head as she groaned and raised her hand to her temple. She forced her eyes open and looked around, trying to understand where she was. The room was quiet, dimly lit by a single light above her. Before she could gather her thoughts, a voice echoed through the space. It calmly stated that she had finally woken up. Mary froze. She immediately asked who was there. The figure in front of her didn't answer directly. He looked down at a stack of documents in his hand, speaking as if he were reviewing something routine. He mentioned how unusual it was for someone without color to attract so much attention. Then he shifted his focus to a photo. Kay's photo. He commented on how rare it was for someone's color to appear so late, but what caught his interest more was something else. He couldn't understand the expression on Kay's face. To him, it didn't match what he remembered. Mary's body tensed. She recognized the voice. Memories from the past surfaced immediately, filling her with fear. The man adjusted his glasses and smiled faintly. He said it had been a long time. Mary stared at him, unable to hide her shock. She couldn't believe he was still alive. The man admitted it casually. He explained that he had nearly died back then, buried under the collapse, but somehow survived. He stepped closer, clearly enjoying the moment. He said he remembered both her and Kay very well. After all, they had been his first experiments. Mary's expression changed completely. The man continued, saying that he had finally achieved success and gained recognition. He introduced himself proudly as a tactician of the darkness. Then he gestured for her to come closer. He said he wanted to show her how far his research had progressed. The lights in the room suddenly brightened. The space around her was revealed in full. It was a massive laboratory. Large containers filled with strange liquids lined the walls, each one holding a human body suspended inside. Below them, people were chained and guarded, their faces filled with fear. Further ahead, iron cages held monstrous creatures, their sharp teeth visible as they growled violently. Mary stared at everything in shock. She couldn't believe a place like this still existed. At that moment, a subordinate approached and handed over a tray filled with glowing purple vials. He reported that these were the final extracts. The man accepted them without hesitation. She shouted, asking if he was going to repeat what he had done before. He simply smiled and said there was no reason not to. Something this valuable shouldn't be wasted. Holding the vial in his hand, he looked at her again. He welcomed her back and told her that she would now witness his new system. Explosions tore through the underground district, filling the night with smoke, fire, and chaos. The ground shook violently as buildings cracked under the impact. Civilians ran in panic, shouting as they tried to escape the destruction. The scene was completely out of control, with no one able to stop what was happening. A man in the crowd cursed loudly, blaming the chaos on another gang conflict. He urged everyone to run before they got caught in it. Amidst the smoke and debris, Kay emerged slowly. His expression was cold as he dragged two unconscious enemies behind him. Without wasting time, he approached a dark tunnel and stopped in front of a trembling man. He asked one thing: "Was Mary taken here?" The man nodded quickly, unable to hide his fear. He confirmed that the girl Kay was looking for was most likely inside. Then he begged to be let go, saying he had done everything he was told. Kay didn't respond. He raised his hand and knocked him out instantly. After that, he called Nero. A small black figure slipped out from his collar and landed lightly. Kay lowered his voice and told it to guide him. He needed to find Mary as fast as possible. Nero responded immediately. Kay gave a faint nod and moved forward. But the disturbance had already drawn attention. Guards above noticed him and shouted, calling others to gather. Within seconds, a group rushed down the stairs, armed with crude weapons ready to stop him. Kay glanced at them briefly. He didn't have time for this. If he delayed even a little longer, Mary would be in danger. Dark energy gathered around his arm as he focused his power. Without hesitation, he swung forward. The attack erupted with overwhelming force, tearing through everything in its path. The explosion that followed shook the entire underground facility. The guards were thrown aside before they could even react. Kay didn't slow down. He moved straight through the rubble, advancing deeper into the base. Inside the laboratory, Mary faced the man in front of her with anger. She couldn't understand how he was still continuing these experiments. The man simply looked at her, pretending not to understand her reaction. He spoke calmly, as if nothing was wrong. He even said he was grateful. Thanks to past experiments, his research had advanced significantly. Then he pointed toward a large machine nearby and told her to look carefully. At that moment, guards dragged an elderly man toward the chamber. The man struggled desperately, begging for his life, but his pleas were ignored. He was struck and forced inside. The door shut. The machine activated. White smoke filled the air as the system began operating. Moments later, a stream of red liquid started flowing through connected pipes, gradually collecting inside a small glass container. Mary stood frozen. Nothing had changed. This place was exactly the same as before. The man began explaining his process as if presenting a successful experiment. He talked about his earlier failures when he couldn't extract anything meaningful. But over time, he discovered something important. People who awakened their abilities later in life had hidden potential. If that potential could be extracted directly, it could be turned into something valuable. And now he had succeeded. He explained everything calmly, as if it were normal. Not just humans, but even monsters could be used as material. To him, it didn't matter what they were. All that mattered was the result. He looked at the collected liquid with satisfaction. To him, it wasn't just a substance. It was something far more valuable. Blanc raised the vial in his hand with pride and declared that he had every right to use what he extracted however he pleased. In his view, he was doing something meaningful. He believed he was uncovering hidden value and allowing it to shine in its purest form. He looked at the swirling purple liquid with clear fascination. He called it a hybrid seed, the result of years of research combined with his own extraction ability. He admitted he was still exploring its full potential, but what he had achieved so far was already beyond expectations. He explained that creatures were often drawn to these extracted colors. Even without full control, the effect was noticeable. Mary could no longer stay silent. She shouted at him, calling everything he was doing disgusting. She couldn't accept how he could treat living people like materials, forcing them into machines just to produce something like that. She asked if he really thought he would never be punished for such actions. Blanc didn't react with anger. Instead, he smiled faintly as if he had expected this response. He calmly said he didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing. To him, the problem was simply that others couldn't understand his work. Mary's anger only grew stronger. She told him to stop talking and called him exactly what he was. She mocked his obsession, telling him to try extracting his own color if he believed so strongly in it. For a brief moment, Blanc's expression changed. Then he responded quietly. He said he already had. Mary froze. Blanc slowly removed his glove and revealed part of his body. He explained that he had tested the process on himself first. If it was something he created, then he had to understand it fully. He showed no hesitation in admitting it. His arm had been altered, and one of his eyes now carried a faint purple glow. He spoke about his own color with a strange sense of admiration, as if it were something precious. Mary couldn't bear to listen anymore. She held her head, telling him to stop. She didn't care about his explanations or his so-called research. Blanc laughed lightly, realizing he had gone too far. He admitted he got carried away, but then casually shifted the conversation. He mentioned Kay. He said Kay had already entered the underground city. Mary's expression changed immediately. Blanc confirmed it calmly. Kidnapping her had been intentional. She was the perfect way to draw Kay out. He even brought up how Kay used to stay close to her, never leaving her side. To him, everything had gone exactly as planned. He was certain that no matter how strong Kay was, he wouldn't be able to handle the numbers waiting outside. Without wasting more time, Blanc gave an order for Mary to be taken away. He said they would meet again once Kay arrived. Mary struggled, shouting for them to let her go, but no one listened. Blanc turned his back and began walking away, preparing for what he considered the next stage. He also checked the batch of hybrid seeds that were ready to be delivered. Then, without warning, a violent tremor shook the entire laboratory. Blanc stopped immediately. He couldn't understand what was happening. The ceiling cracked. In the next instant, it collapsed. A massive explosion followed, sending debris crashing down. The guards shouted in panic as dust and smoke filled the entire space. Blanc stood frozen, trying to process the sudden destruction. Through the falling debris, a dark figure dropped into the room. Mary looked up. For a moment, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Through the smoke, Kay appeared. He stood there calmly, his eyes fixed on the enemies in front of him. Mary's voice broke as she called out his name. At the High Council chamber, Counselor Hudson slammed his hand against the table. His voice filled with urgency as he demanded to know what their priority target was doing. Chamalia immediately reported the situation. Kay had entered the underground city and was currently fighting against the Dark Organization. According to surveillance reports, He had already destroyed multiple enemy sectors while attempting to rescue his kidnapped friend. Hudson's expression hardened as he turned to question how things had escalated this far, but Chamelia quickly explained. She had already assigned personnel to track him and had not been negligent. The real issue was the current state of their forces. Due to abnormal activity in the outer regions, their manpower was stretched thin. Units were scattered across multiple fronts, handling everything from resource extraction to city defense. Reinforcements could not be mobilized easily under these conditions. When Hudson asked about Red's status, Chamelia confirmed that he was currently engaged in battle elsewhere, facing 2 high-level enemies at another stronghold. Hudson clenched his jaw. He immediately ordered the security forces to be deployed to protect Kay. But before the order could be carried out, another council member intervened. The man, wearing a monocle, argued that sending forces into the underground city so hastily would only escalate tensions. It could provoke the criminal factions and lead to a larger conflict. He warned that the strength of those groups, especially those involved in color manipulation, should not be underestimated. A war in the current situation would push the entire city into chaos. He then shifted his attention to Kay. In his view, Kay was not an asset but a risk, a dangerous individual with unstable power. He believed this situation only confirmed his concerns. Coldly, he suggested that doing nothing might be the better option. Allowing Kay to be eliminated here would remove a future threat entirely. The room fell silent for a moment. Hudson did not back down. He insisted that Kay had to be protected. He was the only one capable of breaking certain barriers, and his importance to the council was undeniable. Hudson made his stance clear. He was willing to take responsibility and place his trust in the future Kay could create. The monocled counselor looked at him with clear disdain. He mocked Hudson's judgment, implying that his decision was a mistake. Hudson didn't react emotionally. He simply replied that he would continue to meet expectations in his own way. The other man chose not to argue further. He stood up, took his cane, and left the chamber, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. After he was gone, Chamelia spoke calmly. She said she would personally join the operation and deploy additional members of the Red Team. These were experienced individuals who had already proven themselves in previous missions. She asked if that would be enough. After a brief pause, Hudson agreed. He emphasized that the situation needed to be handled carefully without causing further disruption to the city. Back in the underground facility, Mary looked up through the dust and debris. She saw him. Her voice broke as she called out his name. Blanc froze. He couldn't understand how Kay had made it this far. Kay didn't speak. His focus was clear. Mary's safety came first. Without hesitation, he activated his power. Dark energy surged through his mechanical arm as sharp claws extended outward. In the next instant, a massive wave of black energy burst forward, sweeping through the entire area. The guards were thrown aside before they could react. The impact destroyed containment units, causing experimental liquids to spill across the floor. Kay didn't stop. He moved forward at high speed, closing the distance instantly. 2 guards were taken down before they even realized what had happened. Within seconds, he stood directly in front of Mary. The chaos around them continued, but he remained steady. He had reached her. Kay slightly turned his head toward Mary, his voice low as he told her he was sorry for being late and gently asked if she had been waiting for long. Before she could answer, Nero leaped down from above and landed in her arms, making her call out in surprise. She immediately hugged the small creature tightly, her expression softening as tears gathered in her eyes. She apologized for making them worry and thanked them for coming to save her. Kay remained quiet, his expression still serious. From the distance, a loud shout echoed, urging everyone to run. Taking advantage of the chaos, the prisoners began to flee. With the guards already defeated, they pushed toward the exit, calling to each other as they escaped. It was their only chance. Watching this from afar, Blanc clicked his tongue in annoyance as he saw his test subjects slipping away. He muttered that it was unfortunate, but quickly brushed it aside, convincing himself that more materials could always be gathered later. He then turned his attention back to Kay, his face stretching into a familiar smile. He spoke as if greeting an old acquaintance, saying how good it was to finally see him after hearing about his color. The excitement in his tone was unsettling, as if he had been looking forward to this moment for a long time. Blanc stared at Kay with a strange intensity, his eyes filled with curiosity and desire. He wondered aloud how brilliant the result would be if he extracted Kay's power. Kay looked at him coldly, his gaze filled with clear disdain. He simply questioned who the man was as if he barely remembered him. Mary quickly reminded him that this was Blanc, the one who had experimented on them before. Kay studied him more carefully, a faint suspicion rising as he realized that Blanc had somehow survived the collapse back then. Blanc responded casually, almost mockingly, saying that he was very much alive. He lifted several vials filled with brightly colored liquid and declared that they should skip the greetings and get straight to the exchange. Without warning, he threw the vials toward Kay. They shattered at his feet, spilling their contents across the ground. Kay frowned slightly, unsure of what it was, but Mary immediately shouted a warning, telling him that the substance was used to attract monsters. Kay's expression changed instantly. Standing near a control panel, Blanc admitted that he preferred not to dirty his hands himself. He gestured toward the rows of iron cages nearby and explained that while the creatures inside were not strong enough to defeat Kay, they would be enough to wear him down. Without hesitation, he pulled a lever. At once, the cages opened. Ferocious roars filled the room as starving monsters poured out, charging forward like a dark tide. Kay immediately activated his power, channeling dark energy into his mechanical arm. Without hesitation, he rushed into the swarm, cutting through the creatures with swift, precise strikes. One after another, the monsters fell before they could even react. Blanc watched the scene with interest, clicking his tongue as he complained about the wasted specimens. Then he activated his ability. A stream of dark energy from Kay's attacks was drawn into a vial in Blanc's hand. His eyes lit up as he observed the substance forming inside, clearly fascinated. He muttered that this was exactly what he had been looking for, but quickly added that it still wasn't enough. Blanc's excitement grew as he challenged Kay, urging him to show more of his power. Meanwhile, Kay continued fighting within the encirclement, his movements slightly slower than before. Mary watched anxiously and realized something was wrong. Normally, he would have cleared everything easily, but now he was struggling. She understood that he must have already used too much energy before arriving here. If he could absorb more energy, he would recover, but he needed an opening. Her eyes shifted to the liquid scattered across the floor. Remembering what it was, she immediately formed a plan. Without hesitation, she rushed to the nearby machinery and began tampering with it. Pulling out 2 exposed cables, she gathered her strength and created a strong electric current between them. She shouted a warning to Kay, telling him to watch the ground. Then she released the current. The electricity surged through the liquid spread across the floor, spreading instantly across the entire area. The monsters were caught off guard. A powerful electric shock swept through them, freezing their movements and disrupting the entire swarm in an instant. Mary gritted her teeth and shouted for everything to be burned away. In an instant, the entire area crackled with energy, and the swarm of ferocious monsters was wiped out. The smell of scorched flesh filled the room as silence returned. Kay stood at the center of the battlefield, electricity still flickering faintly around him. Blanc clicked his tongue in frustration as he looked at the fallen creatures. His precious monsters had been completely destroyed. Seizing the moment, Mary called out sharply, telling Kay that now was his chance. Kay didn't hesitate. He dashed forward, channeling all his power into his mechanical arm. The joints shifted with a heavy sound as dark energy gathered, then erupted outward. A violent wave of black aura spiraled into a tornado, rushing straight toward Blanc. Seeing this overwhelming attack, Blanc didn't panic. Instead, his eyes lit up with excitement. He stared at the incoming power as if witnessing something extraordinary, fascinated by the sheer force of the black color. He muttered that the monsters had only been bait after all. Even now, he remained lost in his obsession, speaking about turning everything into his own possessions and achieving the ideal he had always dreamed of. His gaze locked onto Kay with unsettling greed, and he stepped forward, asking if even a small piece of that power could be shared with him. Kay didn't respond to the rambling. With cold eyes, he rushed forward like a shadow and cut through the distance instantly. His voice was calm and sharp as he asked if Blanc was done talking. A powerful slash of dark energy followed. The attack landed, but Blanc still smiled. He casually remarked that disagreements were normal in research and that he would simply accept it. Instead of continuing the clash head-on, he retreated, explaining that direct combat wasn't his specialty. Then he revealed his preparation. From his arm, he pulled out 2 vials filled with green and purple liquid. Without hesitation, he inserted them into his mechanical device. The liquids flowed backward, merging into the system. Almost instantly, a dark purple energy spread across his arm, coating it in a corrosive aura. Blanc smiled with confidence, saying that they were actually very similar. He claimed that Kay's way of absorbing power and his own method of extraction were not so different. Then the two collided again. The battle turned into a fierce close-range exchange. Each clash sent out shockwaves that rattled the entire laboratory. Even while fighting, Blanc continued talking, his tone filled with twisted excitement. He said that despite attacking each other, their natures were compatible and even suggested working together. He tried to persuade Kay, claiming that only someone like him could truly understand the value of his research. He spoke about the nature of colors, about reaching deeper truths, about combining their abilities into something greater. To him, it was a perfect partnership. But beneath all that talk, his intention was obvious. He wanted Kay's power. Blanc's eyes burned with obsession as he demanded to know how it felt to absorb someone else's color. His voice grew unstable as envy took over. He wanted to experience it himself, even if only a little. Suddenly, he lunged forward like a starving beast, aiming directly for the source of Kay's power. But before he could reach it, a burst of green light erupted. Blanc froze. The smile vanished from his face as he stared in disbelief. Kay had activated a new technique. A powerful emerald energy surged out, wrapping around his mechanical arm. Even Kay seemed momentarily surprised by the sudden change. The next impact created a massive shockwave. Blanc was thrown back violently, crashing into the rubble. He coughed repeatedly, his breathing uneven and strained. Even in that broken state, his eyes still held admiration. He struggled to speak, saying that this power had far exceeded his expectations. Even while struggling to stand, Blanc still found the time to praise Kay, staring at him with a twisted sense of admiration. Watching Kay absorb color so naturally in the middle of battle left him stunned. He quickly realized that no matter what he prepared, it would all be drained away. For the first time, fear crept into him. He admitted to himself that defeating Kay like this would be nearly impossible. Backed into a corner, he reached for his final option. With trembling hands, he pulled out a vial filled with thick black liquid. Kay immediately sensed the danger. His gaze sharpened as he demanded to know what Blanc was about to do. Blanc burst into manic laughter. He claimed he wasn't trying to die, only to push his research further. Without hesitation, he injected the vial into his mechanical arm. He declared that even if it cost him his life, it would still be worth it. The moment the liquid entered his system, everything changed. A violent surge of dark energy exploded outward, engulfing his body. The transformation was unstable, chaotic, and terrifying. Yet Blanc only laughed louder. He was ecstatic. The experiment had succeeded. A black liquid began to seep from his eye, proof of the power he had just forced into himself. His arm twisted and mutated, becoming something unnatural, covered in jagged dark energy. He admired his own form like a madman. Looking at Kay, his eyes glowed with a dangerous intensity, as he warned that even he could no longer control what he had become. Then they clashed again. The collision shook the entire space, their power tearing through the surroundings. Blanc laughed wildly as he experienced the strength for himself, calling it incredible. Even while being pushed back, he continued talking, trying to convince Kay once more. He insisted their meeting was fate and that they should work together. He tempted him with the idea of discovering the true nature of his own power. Kay cut him off without hesitation. He told him to stop talking and made it clear they were nothing alike. Blanc only laughed harder. He claimed they were exactly the same and even brought Mary into it, suggesting that Kay was holding back because of her. Kay's expression turned cold. Blanc continued, speaking as if he understood everything about him. He described Kay as someone who consumed the power of others to grow, someone driven purely by his own goals. To him, Kay was just another version of himself. He even tried to frame it as admiration. But before he could continue, something flew through the air. A heavy wrench struck him directly, interrupting his speech and knocking him off balance. Above them, Mary stood with a hammer in her hand, her expression filled with anger. She shouted at him, telling him to stop pretending like he understood Kay. She reminded him that he barely knew anything about him, and yet he kept acting like they were the same. Her voice rose with emotion as she called him out for what he truly was. To her, someone who treated people as nothing more than materials had no right to compare himself to anyone. She firmly declared that Kay was simply himself. He didn't imitate anyone, and everything he had was the result of his own effort. Her anger didn't stop there. She spoke about how hard he had struggled, about the person he had always been, even back when they were younger. To her, he wasn't anything strange or unnatural. He was just different but still human. Unable to hold back, she shouted that Blanc had no right to judge him. She began throwing more tools at him, venting all her anger in that moment. Through all of it, Kay stood silently watching her. Something in his expression changed. A faint smile appeared. In the next instant, he moved. Closing the distance instantly, he grabbed Blanc before he could react. A surge of dark energy exploded outward, shaking everything around them. Blanc trembled, but not from fear. He was still fascinated, amazed that Kay's power could grow even further. Through the swirling darkness, Kay quietly called out to Mary. Then he thanked her. Without hesitation, he struck. His fist crashed into Blanc with overwhelming force, sending him flying before he could even react. Blanc's body couldn't handle it anymore. As he was thrown back, he realized too late that he had already pushed himself beyond his limits. His voice weakened as he admitted it. Even in that moment, he couldn't stop himself from acknowledging it. Kay's power was something truly extraordinary. A massive explosion shook the laboratory as Blanc was slammed into the ground, creating a deep crater that spread cracks in every direction. The sheer force of it left the entire area trembling. As the dust slowly settled, Kay remained standing at the center of the destruction. Mary rushed toward him immediately, calling his name in panic. She quickly checked him over, asking if he was hurt. Kay gave a small nod, calmly saying he was fine. Both of them looked down at Blanc. The man lay motionless on the ground, barely alive. Mary hesitated, still shaken, and asked if he was truly finished this time. Kay observed him carefully and confirmed that he was only holding on to his last breath. In that moment, he made a decision. This had to end here. He tightened his grip, telling himself that he couldn't afford to leave any loose ends. Letting Blanc live would only mean facing the same nightmare again. But even in that broken state, Blanc forced himself to move. A faint, distorted laugh escaped his lips as he slowly raised his head. He admitted that even with this borrowed power, he still couldn't defeat Kay. Yet the obsession in his eyes didn't fade. He spoke about wanting more, about how things might have turned out differently if he had just a little more of that power. Before Kay could act, everything changed. A violent explosion erupted. The entire laboratory began to collapse as flames spread and debris rained down. Kay immediately moved, shielding Mary from the falling rubble. Amidst the chaos, Blanc's voice echoed through the destruction. He revealed that explosives had already been planted throughout the facility and that the entire place was set to be erased. With communication cut off and the damage already done, the higher-ups had triggered the system to destroy everything. The explosions grew more intense. Blanc laughed wildly, saying that since this was his final chance, there was nothing left for him to hold back. Then the ground beneath Kay and Mary gave way. Both of them fell. They dropped into darkness as the world above collapsed behind them. Kay instinctively called out, reaching into the void as they plunged deeper. Moments later, he hit something heavy. a pool of thick black liquid. He struggled to the surface, gasping for air as he looked around in shock. The substance surrounding him was dense and unnatural. Then the realization hit him. This was the waste from the extraction process. Everything had leaked down here and gathered into this massive pool. His heart dropped. Mary. That was all he could think about. Suddenly, he saw her. She was struggling in the dark liquid, barely staying afloat. Her face was covered and she was already sinking. She tried to call his name, her voice weak and breaking. Kay froze for only a moment before panic took over. He rushed toward her, but everything was happening too fast. Her body slipped beneath the surface. The black liquid swallowed her completely. Only faint bubbles remained. Kay's voice broke as he called out to her, but there was no response. Without thinking, he dove straight down into the abyss. Below, the darkness was endless. Far beneath the surface, Mary's body slowly sank, a faint light still flickering around her. Kay pushed himself forward, forcing his body to move faster. He thought about absorbing everything around him, taking in all the energy at once, but immediately realized it would take too long. He didn't have that kind of time. His hand reached out, but the distance between them remained. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was he too late? The thought hit him harder than anything else. Then another thought followed. Why had he taken this power in the first place? Wasn't it to protect something like this? His eyes locked onto the faint light below. If he gave up now, that light would disappear forever. That realization burned through him. No, he refused to accept it. With everything he had left, he pushed forward again. Memories surfaced in his mind, vivid and clear. Two children studying together under dim light. Carefree laughter. Simple moments that now felt more important than anything else. Those memories gave him strength. Kay clenched his teeth, pouring all his will into a single motion. He surged forward through the darkness like an arrow, diving deeper into the abyss, chasing the fading light with everything he had. Kay's mechanical arm shot forward and caught Mary's hand just as she was about to disappear into the darkness. He pulled her close and held her tightly against him as the violent current of black liquid raged around them. His voice broke as he begged her not to die. He reminded her of the promise she had once made, that she would stay by his side until he became a color mixer. Those words echoed in his mind, along with her voice from the past, telling him that everyone had their own light and color within them. She had always believed he did too, even when he couldn't see it himself. The memory hurt even more now. He saw her younger self again, smiling brightly as she encouraged him to take things one step at a time, promising she would help him no matter what. Those words had stayed with him all this time. They were the same kind of words that had guided him forward, the reason he had never stopped moving. If one person had shown him the path, then she had been the reason he kept walking it. Now, holding her in the darkness, he could only beg her to wake up. He clutched her tightly, calling out to her, refusing to let go. But when he looked down at her face, his heart froze. She wasn't breathing. For a moment, everything went silent. His thoughts stopped. Then panic took over. He couldn't understand why this was happening. He had absorbed all the black energy around him, yet he still couldn't save her. Just as despair began to consume him, a faint light flickered from her chest. Kay stared in shock. He recognized it immediately. It was the light she had always talked about. The power that existed within her. He realized what he had to do. Pushing aside his fear, he focused entirely on her, holding her hand firmly as he tried to draw that light out. He told himself he could do it, that he just had to repeat what he had done before. A burst of light erupted. It spread outward like a blazing star, surrounding both of them in a radiant glow. Kay felt something completely different from anything he had experienced before. This wasn't like absorbing color. This was something else entirely. Within that light, he began to understand. It was her true power. A pure energy born from everything she was, her warmth, her kindness, her hope, her joy. All of it came together into a brilliant glow that cut through the darkness. Kay couldn't help but be moved. This was her light. And it was beautiful. The golden radiance grew stronger, wrapping around her body. Then suddenly, she opened her eyes. They shone with a bright golden color. Kay stared in disbelief, then quickly called out her name. Relief washed over him as he realized she was alive. She slowly touched her neck, confused, trying to understand what had just happened. She remembered falling into the black liquid, but everything after that was unclear. Then she looked at her hands. Her expression changed instantly. Her hair had turned into a radiant golden color. Panic filled her voice as she asked what had happened to her. Kay quickly reassured her, telling her to calm down and asking if she felt any pain or discomfort. She checked herself and said she felt fine, though her voice still trembled slightly. Looking around at the collapsing surroundings, Kay told her they needed to leave immediately. Just then, part of the wall above them gave way. Both of them tensed up, ready for another danger. Through the dust and debris, Nero appeared on a high ledge. They both called out to him in relief. But he wasn't alone. A young man stood beside him, looking down at them with a calm expression. He said he had rushed over as soon as he heard about the emergency and was glad to see they were still alive. Kay's memories felt distant, blurred like fragments drifting through a thick fog. Nothing was clear, nothing felt real. He simply wandered through that emptiness, carried forward without purpose, like a hollow shell guided by something unseen. Sometimes the fog would thin, revealing strange places he didn't recognize, but it never mattered. He just kept moving. Even so, he never felt completely alone. Somewhere in that endless drifting, he always had the sense that someone was near. Nero was the only constant. The small creature stayed by his side no matter where he went, quietly watching over him. For someone who had nothing, that was enough. Nero became his entire world. Then one day, something changed. A light appeared. A man named Lumiel stood before him, surrounded by a radiant glow that shimmered with countless colors. That brilliance carved itself deep into Kay's soul, leaving behind something he would never forget. But the moment didn't last. It ended far too quickly. And once again, Kay returned to wandering. Time passed without meaning. He drifted endlessly, chasing after that same light, hoping he might see it again one day. Then, deep within the underground city, a voice called out to him. Kay looked up startled, his eyes filled with confusion and exhaustion. A girl stood in front of him. It was Mary. She stared at him, puzzled by the strange boy who seemed completely lost. She asked if he could even speak, or if he was just going to stand there like that. Without waiting for an answer, she told him to move, warning him about the toxic rain falling from above. The pipes overhead leaked a mixture of water and black residue. It wasn't something anyone could safely touch. Mary shielded herself and urged him to hurry. There was no time to waste. They ran together, trying to avoid being seen, slipping past barriers and broken paths. But they didn't get far. The guards found them. They shouted, grabbing them without hesitation. Kay felt a heavy grip seize his arm as he was dragged away into darkness. They were taken deep into a facility hidden beneath the city. Waiting for them inside was Blanc. He looked at them like they weren't even human, calling them valuable samples while smiling in a way that made their fear even worse. More children were there. All of them looked defeated. Mary quickly realized the truth. This wasn't an orphanage. It was a prison. A place that pretended to help abandoned children while secretly exploiting them. They were forced to work, surrounded by toxic substances, treated like tools rather than people. But even that wasn't the worst part. The labor was only a cover. The real purpose of the facility was experimentation. Mary refused to accept it. She began collecting tools in secret, already planning a way out long before Kay had even arrived. Her determination gave the other children something they had almost lost. Hope. She became their anchor, the only light in that suffocating darkness. Quietly, she shared her plan. In 3 days, they would escape. She thanked Kay for helping, even though he still seemed distant and unsure. To her, it didn't matter. She believed all of them would make it out together. It was in that moment that something inside Kay began to change. For the first time, he connected with someone. The children gathered in silence, clinging to the fragile hope of freedom. Mary took the lead, guiding them carefully while avoiding the guards. That night was supposed to be their last in that place. She talked about the future, about a city filled with color where they could finally live freely. Then she asked Kay what he wanted to do. For the first time, he answered. He wanted to become a colorist. The dream surprised her. For someone who had no color at all, it sounded impossible. But to him, it was the only thing he could hold on to, the only path that connected him to the light he once saw. Even so, doubt crept in immediately. Everyone had always told him he was weak, that he had nothing. He admitted he didn't know what to do next. Mary couldn't stand seeing him like that. So she told him something that changed everything. Color didn't always appear early. Sometimes it came later. Even Lumiel had once been just like them. That truth shook him. If someone like Lumiel could reach that level, then maybe it wasn't impossible after all. Mary insisted that everyone had their own light inside them. Even him. She promised to help him find it, step by step. Failure didn't matter. What mattered was trying. She told him to stop overthinking and just move forward. Then with a smile, she forced him to cheer up, refusing to let him stay trapped in that darkness. For a brief moment, everything felt different. They laughed together. It was a rare moment of happiness. But it didn't last. Morning never came. The dream ended before it could even begin. The facility erupted into chaos. Guards stormed in, dragging children away as screams filled the air. It wasn't containment anymore. It was a purge. The system was being wiped clean. Mary tried to fight back, but she was still just a child. A single blow knocked her down. Kay watched in horror as the only person who had reached out to him collapsed. Even then, her only concern was for him to escape. Her voice faded as her strength disappeared. And in that moment, something inside Kay broke. A question rose within him. Was this what anger felt like? The guards believed everything was over. They were wrong. From the ground, a hand moved. Something dark began to awaken. The air itself changed. From the shadows, something no longer human began to rise. Kay stood up. And this time, he wasn't alone. The darkness had answered him. Kay slowly regained consciousness, his vision still hazy as if the world itself had been drained of its color. The first thing he saw was Mary leaning over him, tears streaming down her face in relief. He blinked, still half asleep, trying to understand what had just happened to them. As his senses returned, the answer became obvious. Everything around them had been reduced to ruins. A massive explosion had erased the entire area, leaving behind only silence and destruction. Mary's voice trembled as she told him the truth. It didn't look like anyone else had made it out alive. She stared into the lingering smoke, her expression slowly collapsing under the weight of that realization. Their friends, the other children who had shared their hopes, were all gone. They hadn't deserved any of this. For a moment, the world remained completely still. Then came the sound of footsteps. Kay's eyes sharpened immediately. In a place like this, anyone approaching was more likely a threat than help. Mary wiped her tears, forcing herself to stand. There was no time to grieve. Staying here would only lead to capture or death. Without hesitation, they made a promise to each other. They would survive, no matter what it took. Mary forced a small smile, telling him that one day they would reach the surface and find a better life. Hand in hand, they walked toward the faint light in the distance, even though it felt impossibly far away. Time passed. Now standing in the present, Kay's grip had become steady and firm. The group gathered near the massive hole they had blasted through the hideout. Gale exhaled in relief, clearly glad to have escaped the depths of the underground city, but their attention quickly shifted to Mary. Something about her had changed. Ellie stepped closer, disbelief written all over her face. Mary had always been colorless, yet now her hair shone with a vivid golden hue. She reached out, carefully touching it, confirming it wasn't some illusion. The intensity of that color was overwhelming. It wasn't just rare. It was something people of high status would fight over. It was proof that Mary had finally awakened her color. Kay cut through the moment, reminding them that they were still standing inside enemy territory. There was no time to admire anything. He stayed alert, sensing that the danger hadn't completely disappeared. Gale watched him quietly. Something about Kay felt different. His eyes were colder, emptier, carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Kay told them not to rush, but even as he spoke, he was already moving ahead. To him, the enemies here were nothing more than obstacles to be cleared. The hallway they walked through was filled with motionless bodies, silent evidence of what he had done. Even Mary couldn't hide her shock at the destruction left behind. Gale muttered about how difficult it had been just to get through earlier, while now it felt like everything had already been wiped out. They moved carefully, stepping through the aftermath, watching for any sign of movement. Soon, the sound of approaching boots echoed through the area. The peacekeeping force had arrived. But before they could fully relax, one of the survivors made a desperate move. The man, barely conscious, grabbed a knife from the ground and waited. As soon as the group turned their backs, he lunged forward, targeting Mary with a scream filled with desperation. Gale and Ellie didn't react in time. Kay started to move, but Mary acted first. In panic, she threw a punch. The result stunned everyone. The man was sent flying backward, crashing straight through a concrete wall as if he weighed nothing. Silence followed. Even Mary froze, staring at her own hand. She hadn't meant to do that. Her new power wasn't just a change in color. It came with overwhelming strength. Before anyone could say anything else, the peacekeeping force stormed in, weapons ready, quickly securing the area. The officer in charge looked around at the devastation, clearly shocked. The pioneers had already handled everything before his team even arrived. He acknowledged their work, stating that the organization operating here had been effectively dismantled. With the situation under control, the group finally began to leave. Gale expressed relief at getting out of the underground, while Mary slowly relaxed now that the danger had passed. But something still felt off. Ellie didn't ignore it. She directly called out Kay, pointing out how strange he had been acting. Kay paused. For a brief moment, his expression faltered. He realized he had been letting too much show. Quickly, he covered it up with a forced smile, claiming he had just been thinking about something heavy. Neither Ellie nor Gale believed him completely, but neither of them pushed further. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Gale eventually decided to let it go. Everyone had things they didn't want to talk about. Some pasts were better left buried. And so they moved on, leaving both the ruins and those unanswered questions behind them. Deep within what remained of the underground facility, another scene was unfolding. Blanc was barely alive, his body slumped against the wall, bleeding heavily. Even in that state, his thoughts were fixated on one thing. Kay. He wanted to understand what Kay had truly become. Then something shifted in the darkness. A figure approached. It wasn't help. A woman stepped forward, her presence sharp and predatory. Her name was Viper. She looked down at Blanc with clear annoyance, disappointed that their deal had turned into a mess. Without hesitation, she stepped on him, forcing him flat against the ground. Blanc could barely respond, his voice weak and broken. But she didn't care about his condition. She only cared about what he owed her. With a faint smile, she pulled out a glowing substance, calling it poison. For Blanc, however, it was the only thing keeping him alive. Dust slowly settled across the ruined ground as silence returned to the area. Viper's younger sister stood nearby, her body trembling as she nervously asked why she had taken so long to arrive. Viper showed no patience for the complaint and coldly told her that next time she would drag her along from the very beginning. From deeper within the shadows, the sword demon stepped forward. His expression carried clear dissatisfaction, and he wasted no time getting to the point, asking if she had brought what they needed. Without hesitation, Viper revealed a box filled with vials. Inside was a strange substance known as atypical color, a mixture unstable yet full of potential. She was already thinking ahead, calculating how much profit this cooperation would bring her in the future. Everything had been prepared exactly as planned. The atmosphere inside the cave grew heavier. A massive creature loomed behind them, its form resembling something with multiple tails, radiating a terrifying presence. Viper's sister could barely contain her fear, but Viper remained completely composed, standing confidently atop the monster's back. Even the sword demon showed doubt. Creatures like this were normally controlled only by the Black Witch. If something went wrong, it would be impossible to contain. Viper simply smiled. With the Black Witch currently inactive, the natural order had begun to weaken. That gap was exactly what she intended to exploit. The vial in her hand was the key. She opened it and poured the strange purple liquid onto the creature, calmly giving it a command. If it wanted more color, it would have to obey. At that moment, the creature's eyes snapped open. Its gaze was empty, wild, completely feral. A deafening roar echoed through the cave, shaking the entire structure as the beast awakened. Viper's expression lit up with satisfaction. The experiment had worked exactly as she expected. Their objective was simple now, to destroy the Shining City completely. Above ground, the disturbance was already being noticed. Citizens whispered among themselves, uneasy at the growing tension. Some assumed it was just another clash between gangs, but the presence of peacekeepers suggested something far more serious. A guard tried to calm the crowd, assuring them that the situation was under control and that troublemakers were being dealt with. At the same time, urgent reports began reaching the higher authorities. Through the crowd, a figure glowing with a strong red aura approached. It was Team Leader Red. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere. He quickly found Kay and questioned what kind of situation they had gotten themselves into this time. It didn't take long for him to realize that something about this incident was unusual. His attention moved to Mary. She had changed. Her newly awakened color made her stand out immediately, and Red understood that this was not something that could be discussed in public. Too many people were watching. Without delay, they moved to the Dawn Pioneer Corps headquarters. Inside, Chamlea was already waiting, clearly amused. She commented on how Red always managed to bring back something interesting. A new awakener appearing alongside Kay was not something that happened often. She introduced herself to Mary, who was still trying to process everything. Since the emergence of awakeners, individuals like her had become extremely valuable. Those who possessed color were the ones shaping the future. Chamlea openly admired Mary's vivid golden hue before getting straight to the point. She asked if Mary would consider joining the Dawn Corps, promising that they could provide whatever she needed. The offer came with pressure. Mary instinctively looked toward Kay for support, but he only gave a faint smile, leaving the decision entirely to her. After a moment of hesitation, Mary made up her mind. She accepted. She had her own goals, and becoming a pioneer was the path she had chosen. Chamlea was visibly pleased and immediately tried to move forward with the process. But before anything could be finalized, another voice interrupted. Team Leader Yellow stepped forward from the shadows. He stated calmly that rules could not be ignored. Every new member had to pass an initiation test, regardless of their potential. The group moved to the indoor arena. Chamlea was clearly annoyed, arguing that delaying things could risk losing such a rare recruit, but Yellow remained firm. Mary stood her ground. When asked if she was ready, she nodded. She selected her weapon, a heavy cannon powered by color vials, and prepared herself. The test was simple. Defeat the golem. As the gate opened, a massive mechanical construct stepped forward, steam venting from its body. Its sheer size and presence made it clear that this was not a simple test. Mary hesitated for a brief moment. Then the battle began. The golem attacked immediately, its strikes powerful enough to shatter the ground. Mary struggled to dodge, barely managing to avoid each blow. She moved constantly, trying to create distance, but the pressure was overwhelming. From the stands, Chamlea protested, believing the test was too harsh for someone with no combat experience. Mary's movements became more frantic as the golem continued its relentless assault. Then something changed. She stopped running. If she wanted to prove herself, she had to fight. Raising her weapon, she began channeling all of her energy into it. The cannon vibrated under the strain as she pushed it beyond its normal limits. She had only one chance. With a single motion, she fired. A massive golden explosion erupted, completely obliterating the golem in an instant. The arena shook under the force of the blast. Everyone watching was left stunned. Even Kay hadn't expected that level of power. Team leader Yellow remained silent for a moment, realizing that the energy output she had just displayed had briefly reached his own level. For a first attempt, it was beyond anything considered normal. But the situation didn't stabilize. Mary's power continued to surge uncontrollably. Golden energy spread outward, forcing everyone nearby to retreat. She shouted in panic, unable to stop the flow. Yellow rushed forward, trying to bring the situation under control, but it was already too late. The energy overflowed. A final explosion tore through the arena roof as Mary cried out, unable to contain her own strength. The ground of the arena was broken and uneven, with debris scattered around after the impact. A few people stood calmly at the center. Someone apologized for the damage, but it was dismissed as unimportant, and the focus quickly moved on. Camellia stepped forward with a light smile and looked at Marie. She checked her condition and praised her performance, saying she had done much better than expected. Marie seemed a bit overwhelmed, but she had clearly shown strong ability despite being unprepared. Without wasting time, Marie was accepted into the Dawn Pioneers. The decision was direct, and everyone present understood its importance. Nearby, a few others watched quietly. Some felt relieved seeing capable people gather, while others were simply curious about what would happen next. Camellia then spoke to a blond man, asking if he had any objections. He replied that he never had a problem, he only wanted proper justification. Now that Marie had proven herself, everything was fine. He also noted that her power might be higher than others of her generation. After that, he called Marie to follow him and mentioned there were still some formal steps left. Marie went with him, still trying to process everything. Soon after, Red approached another group, including Kay, Gale, and Blue, and asked if they were free. When they agreed, he took them to a large training area. The place was empty, with a wide open floor, making it suitable for practice. He pointed towards some training dummies and explained that they were built to be very durable. Normal attacks would not work well on them. Red then told them to pay attention. In the future, they would face enemies that could not be damaged easily. Some would resist attacks completely, and others could recover even after being hit. He drew his sword, and a red energy started forming around it. He explained that this power was called chroma. It existed inside everyone and could be used by bringing it out and applying it to the body or weapon. With a simple movement, he swung his sword once. The strike was clean and controlled, and the dummy was cut in half instantly. There was no extra movement or force. He explained that every defense has a limit. What matters is having enough control and power to go beyond that limit. After that, he told them to take out their weapons and get ready. He would teach them how to train their chroma. Instead of releasing their energy outward, they had to keep it inside and focus it into their body or weapon. Gale and Blue tried first. They quickly realized it was not easy. Their energy was hard to control, and it drained them faster than expected. Red said this was normal. Then he looked at Kay. Kay was using a lot of power, but most of it was being wasted. Red pointed out that Kay was releasing too much without control. He explained that relying only on absorbing power was risky. If Kay fought someone stronger, he could run out of energy and lose. Kay understood this and admitted he had been careless. Red told him to stop holding back and just release everything he could for now. Kay followed the instruction. Dark energy spread around him, covering the ground. The pressure increased, and it became hard to maintain. Red watched quietly and told him to keep going. Then he added that if Kay slowed down, he would be killed. Kay was shocked, but Red didn't change his expression. He simply asked if Kay couldn't continue. That pushed Kay to try harder. Even though he was exhausted, he forced himself to keep going. After some time, Kay, Gale, and Blue all collapsed from exhaustion. They were breathing heavily and completely drained. Kay wondered if they had to do this every day. He felt like he had used too much of his energy already. Red said their performance was fine for the first day and that they could stop. But before they could relax, he called them again and said they weren't done yet. The mood changed immediately. Red drew his sword again and said the real training would start now. To finish the session, they would fight him. He told them to attack him seriously, as if their lives depended on it. They were tired, but they understood he was not joking. The training wasn't over yet. The three of them stood together, watching everything quietly.